Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. Married the Black Widow at the beginning. Chapter 41. In Thor 3, Thor and the Hulk had a fight in the Colosseum on Sakaar. Thor was able to slightly defeat the Hulk with physical strength alone, but only slightly. He has 3 times the strength of the Hulk, and he is not the reckless bull like the Hulk who can only smash and chop randomly, so he is sure to suppress the God of Thunder with physical power. If it were limited to this, I would never dare to say that I could beat Thor. Because the complete form of Thor also needs the hammer of Thor. With a hammer in hand, Thor's strength increases more than 10 times. As long as this hammer is placed on himself, he will have no resistance, let alone the additional power of thunder and lightning. However, I had just gained the recognition of the hammer yesterday, and I knew the various attack methods of the hammer. Even if I could not win the hammer in a battle, I would still be able to resist and dodge it. Calculating it this way, I am in the dark and the God of Thunder is in the light, so maybe I can beat him again. The God of Thunder naturally didn't believe it. He straightened his back, his eyes were like lightning, and he was full of majesty, and said, "Tang, you don't know, the true strength of a god is far beyond what people on earth can imagine." Before he finished speaking, Jane suddenly slapped him on the head. "Stop. Are you two finished? If you do this again, I will send you both to the hospital to see if your brains are crazy from fighting." Seeing Jane's angry and worried look, Thor suddenly withered. "Jane, don't worry, we are normal, nothing happened. It's rare to meet people of the same mind and brag to each other." "Really?" Jane looked at the two of them suspiciously, thinking to herself, is this the friendship between men? Jane is an astrophysicist who has devoted all his life to scientific research. He is similar to most nerds and knows little about the world. I remember that when my best friend and I were crazy, we would role-play each other, one would talk and the other would answer, and we would play like crazy. Maybe the two of them are anime lovers, but they both say that men never grow up, so it seems reasonable for 2 grown men to like the myth of Asgard. Go back and check the information on Asgard to see what charms make men fascinated. Thinking about it this way, Jane felt that men were not so difficult to understand. Tianchi deliberately lowered his voice, leaned closer and said quietly, "I know where Thor's hammer is, do you want to go and have a look?" Jane was speechless and put her hand on her forehead. Oh my god, these 2 guys are endless. After hearing this, Thor said anxiously, "Dawn, don't lie to me. I'm going to get the hammer back now." After that, he walked out of the bar. Jian and Tianchi had no choice but to follow them out. It's so embarrassing to leave Ron kneeling on the ground. The master is really gone, should I continue to kneel? Thor asked. "Jane, do you know where the horse is?" "What do you want a horse for?" "I want to get back what belongs to me. In Asgard, major ceremonies are carried out on Pegasus." Jane was helpless. "Don't you know there is such a thing as a car?" In the original plot, Thor seems to be portrayed as being a little unhuman to Earth and not knowing that there are cars. In fact, this is simply not possible. Not to mention that Thor was knocked unconscious by Jane in the RV and sent to the hospital. As the heir of Asgard, Thor lived for more than 500 years. He usually traveled through the 9 kingdoms and traveled in and out of spaceships. What kind of thing? I have never seen high technology, how could I act like a country bumpkin? The only explanation is that in such a depressed situation, he wanted to find some comfort through some retro rituals. While the two of them were looking around, Tianchi had already led 2 horses over. Thor laughed heartily and stepped forward to give Tianchi a bear hug. "Tang, good friend, you still understand me." The two of them headed towards Thor's hammer, chatting and laughing. Jane, who was thrown behind her, couldn't believe it. She was so angry that her teeth rattled. What happened to these 2 grown men? Just run away. First there was a drinking fight, and he got very drunk, then there was a fight, and he was beaten with bruises and bruises, then there was some Asgard story roleplay, and now he was talking about looking for Thor's hammer. Okay, I know you guys won't grow up, but you won't forget to have a beautiful woman by your side, right? It would be such a romantic thing to hold yourself and ride a horse towards the sunset. Didn't any of these 2 straight men think of this? What's the point of asking me to drive alone and follow you? Jane was so angry that she drove back and called Daisy and her old colleague Eric. When they came back, Apocalypse and Thor were already far away. 50 kilometers is neither long nor short. It was already evening when the two arrived. After only 1 day away, a large tent had been erected at the site of Thor's hammer, surrounding an area of nearly 20 meters, divided into multiple areas, responsible for different responsibilities. The lights inside are bright and countless people are busy. The two of them lay down on a protruding hillside, hiding themselves and observing the situation. The god of thunder said, "Tang, I can sense that the hammer is inside. I will come back as soon as I go. Do you need my help?" "No need. I want to be re-recognized by Thor's hammer, and no one else can help." "Okay then." Tianqi chewed a blade of grass out of boredom. "I'll wait for you." In the original plot, Thor lost his divine power. Although he broke in, he was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. and failed to get the hammer. With Thor's current situation, this plot probably won't change. Sure enough, Thor wanted to lurk in, but S.H.I.E.L.D.'s defenses were tight, and he was discovered by the guards before he could run far. Then there was a commotion inside, and many people began to block Thor. Although he has lost his divine power, Thor's strength is not comparable to that of ordinary earthlings. He knocked down countless guard soldiers along the way, broke through layers of defenses, and came towards Thor's hammer. Suddenly, a shadow moved on the tower, drew a bow, and pointed at the god of thunder in the distance. The shadow's hand loosened, and an arrow silently shot towards the god of thunder. The god of thunder was only a little stronger than ordinary people at this time, and he was completely unaware of the flying arrow. Just as he was about to shoot it, there was a sudden pop sound, and the flying arrow fell to the ground. When the black shadow took a look, it turned out to be the most ordinary pebble. This black shadow is naturally Hawkeye, Barton. And it was Tianqi who shot down the flying arrow. Hawkeye looked around and quickly located Tianqi's location. He stretched his hand to his back, and 3 arrows flew from the string. These 3 arrows not only blocked Apocalypse's possible dodge routes, but also varied in speed and were elusive. The one in the middle seemed to be flying very fast, but halfway through the flight, the arrows on both sides passed by silently. Under the cover of night, the last ones arrived first. Most people will be attracted by the arrow in the middle and focus more on defending against the arrow. They are afraid that they will be hit before the arrow reaches them. Apocalypse smiled and realized that he was indeed a superhero relying on his archery skills. This skill was difficult for ordinary people to guard against. When the tip of the arrow reached his body, an afterimage of a hand passed by, and the 3 arrows were already caught in Tianqi's hand. Eagle Eye was startled, knowing that he had met a master. He shot an arrow quickly and seemingly casually, then turned over in the air and changed positions. He had also seen Tian's ability to use stones to hit flying arrows just now. The power was no less than that of flying arrows, and he could not stay in one place. The 4th arrow was easily caught by Tianqi. Suddenly, he noticed that the arrow flashed a little red light, and he was instantly alert. Explosive arrows. A good swimmer drowns in water. Do you think you can do whatever you want with your quick hands? Hawkeye showed a confident smile. The 4th arrow just now seemed random, but in fact it was an arrow fired from countless battle experiences. In his life, Hawkeye has encountered masters who can catch flying arrows, but these masters have all died under Hawkeye's arrows. Just one reason: arrogance. If Apocalypse could hear what Hawkeye was thinking, he would probably say that he could really do whatever he wanted with his fast hands. At the moment when it was about to explode, Apocalypse clasped his hands together and wrapped the explosive arrow in his palms. Boom! A muffled sound. Tianqi clapped his hands and shook off the black ash of the arrowhead residue in his hand. It seemed as if what was going off in my hand just now was a firecracker. How can it be? Hawkeye was shocked. The arrowhead of the explosive arrow is specially customized and is far more powerful than ordinary grenades. How could a human being hold it in the palm of his hand and block the explosion? In Avengers 1, Loki invaded the Earth, sat on an alien airship, and was shot by Hawkeye with an arrow. At that time, Loki didn't even turn his eyes and he confidently caught the arrow with one hand. Unexpectedly, it was an explosive arrow that blew him off the airship. Even gods can be blown away. The power of explosive arrows is evident. Hawkeye tried to knock an arrow and bend his bow again, but found that the target had disappeared. Suddenly, my back tightened, and a voice came, "Didn't Natasha ever mention me to you?" Hawkeye slowly turned around and raised his bow very wisely. The monster that could hold the explosive arrow in his hand was no different from having a gun against his head when he got close. "Who are you?" Hawkeye asked. "You do not know who I am." "Do I have to know who you are?" Apocalypse shook his head unconsciously. It seemed that not only did Fury not show his information to Hawkeye, but Natasha also never mentioned herself to Hawkeye. Forget it about Fury, he is a cautious old fox after all. But Natasha and Hawkeye are not only comrades who depend on each other for life and death, but they also have an excellent personal friendship. Natasha knew the safe house where Hawkeye's family lived, and often stayed there. To their agents, this was equivalent to handing over their entire family's lives to the other party. Of course, Natasha also loves Hawkeye's children. In the final battle against Thanos, the two rushed to give their lives in exchange for the Soul Stone so that the other person could survive. Publicly and privately, it shows the trust between the two. Thinking of this, Tianchi couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. It seems that Natasha has not fully accepted herself, otherwise, she would not hide her existence from Hawkeye. Tianchi could only say, "My name is Tang Tianchi, and I am Natasha's husband." "Wah, what husband?" Eagle Eye was dumbfounded. He imagined 10,000 possibilities in his mind. Even if Apocalypse said that he was an alien god invited by Hydra, he would not be so surprised. He never expected to hear these words. "Let Natasha tell you. I also want to know why she didn't mention me." With that said, he dialed Black Widow's number. "Natasha, I caught a man named Hawkeye." Before he finished speaking, Black Widow's anxious voice came from the other end. "How is he?" "You didn't beat him to death, did you?" Hawkeye was speechless. Why did he ask himself if he was dead as soon as he opened his mouth? "How?" Looking down, "On your partner," Tianchi said deliberately. "Why do you care about him so much? Moreover, you also concealed from him that you have a husband. What is your relationship?" Black Widow's rapid breathing came over the phone. Don, show mercy, he is a good friend of mine." "Good friend? It's not your other husband, is it?" No, he is just a colleague of mine. We had a fake marriage, but that was required by the mission, and nothing happened to us." Tianchi said. "We also had a fake marriage at the beginning, but everything that was supposed to happen happened." We. Black Widow was so anxious that she didn't know how to answer. "The lying skills I usually train are all for assassinating targets, but I have never been trained on how to deal with such a bloody relationship between men and women. But when I got married to Tianchi, I did everything I had to do." "But if you pretended to be married to Hawkeye and said nothing happened, who would believe it?" Being in such a different place, Black Widow herself didn't believe what she was saying. "This cheap husband of mine was very petty when he joined S.H.I.E.L.D. and was prohibited from using his seduction skills. If the explanation is not clear, Hawkeye's life may be really in danger, and he may dismantle S.H.I.E.L.D. However, the more anxious you are, the more your brain freezes. Don, listen to me. Hawkeye has a wife and children. Oh, do you want me to eradicate it? I will only kill him, not women or children." No, that's not what I meant. Don't do anything yet. Let me think." Hawkeye was a little dumbfounded. Is this still the Black Widow I know? Regardless of whether the husband in front of you is real or fake, Natasha, the more you explain it, the more people will misunderstand it. It wasn't life-threatening at first, but you explained that it was life-threatening. Hawkeye had never seen Black Widow so distraught. During normal missions and in life-and-death situations, she might be calmer than herself, and the two of them escaped many times relying on her calmness. She still has a wife and children, so when it comes to life and death, she will be somewhat concerned and not calm enough, but she never is. Now she was talking to the man in front of her on the phone, and she was at a loss as to how she was afraid that he might misunderstand her. Could it be that he was really her husband? Why have I never heard of it? Seeing the naughty smile on Apocalypse's face, Hawkeye immediately realized that this was deliberately teasing Black Widow. Oops! Hawkeye suddenly screamed and shouted into the phone, "Natasha, if you don't explain clearly, you will have to take care of my wife and children." Don, don't do anything. Hawkeye's child recognizes me as the godmother, and you are the godfather. Don't hurt the child's father. After a lot of anxious thinking, Black Widow finally found out such a reason. Oh, Oh, oh. Hawkeye kept screaming. The more the Black Widow listened, the more something was wrong. The cry was too fake, and she finally realized, are you two colluding to tease me? Just wait, Barton, I will complain to your children about you. Ha 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 ha. Apocalypse and Hawkeye laughed in unison. The Black Widow on the other side of the phone was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, she finally let go of her worries. At least she didn't have to worry about Hawkeye being in danger. When I wanted to ask them how they met, I found that the phone had been hung up. Black Widow stood blankly on the spot holding the phone, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. It should be a joy for your best friend to become friends with your husband. But when he thought that he was the victim of the two people's prank, he couldn't be happy. Tianchi felt very happy. Ha, a scumbag, she doesn't tell her husband on social media, and if she doesn't punish her, she doesn't know who is in charge. Tianchi stretched out his hand and said, Tang Tianchi, Natasha's husband. Hawkeye reached out and held it. Clint Barton, nicknamed Hawkeye, Natasha's friend. Compared to Apocalypse's understanding of them, Hawkeye had countless questions in his mind. Just as he was about to speak, there was a sudden roar from the other side of the tent. No, Father, why? The God of Thunder looked up to the sky and roared, full of disappointment. Having never experienced setbacks, he thought he could become the God of Thunder once he found the hammer. Who would have thought that after passing through many levels and finally holding the hammer, there would be no reaction at all? This devastated Thor, indicating that he was not worthy of possessing a hammer now. At this time, it started raining heavily. The God of Thunder knelt in the mud, motionless, letting the rain and mud splash onto him. In the original plot, Coulson sent his men to kidnap Thor back to the interrogation room, but with Apocalypse's warning, he politely invited Thor into the room and handed him a towel and hot coffee. Hey man, where are you from? Coulson asked. The God of Thunder looked lonely and did not answer. Are you the owner of this hammer? The God of Thunder shook his head and whispered, as if in reply, but also as if he was talking to himself, I am not worthy to be its master now. But I don't know what I did wrong, and why. After questioning for a while, Coulson had no choice but to leave when Thor just lowered his head and remained silent. Because Apocalypse is waiting outside. Hawkeye followed. He didn't have time to ask about Black Widow's affairs for the time being. He would deal with the matter at hand first. Monitoring room. Apocalypse, Coulson, and Hawkeye looked at the surveillance screen. Coulson said, Mr. Tang, is he the hammer owner you mentioned? Correct. Who is he? A hammer is who he is. Ah, Coulson was speechless. This riddle is really driving people crazy, but they dare not ask further. The Eastern man in front of them put more pressure on them than the director. If he doesn't tell, who dares to ask? Since Coulson can't find out that the hammer is Thor's hammer, Apocalypse doesn't want to expose Thor's identity for the time being, so as not to cause any complications. It's just that Coulson and Hawkeye are depressed. However, Coulson remembered one thing. Barton, how did you come in with Mr. Tang? Eagle Eye said, I had a fight with him just now. Hiss. Coulson gasped, are you still alive? Are you that strong? Hawkeye was speechless. How could he talk to Black Widow and ask me why I wasn't dead? His tone didn't sound like he cared at all. But remembering Tien's feat of covering an arrow with his hand, he had no choice but to say, Mr. Tang, he recognizes me and shows mercy. Oh, Coulson suddenly realized, Natasha must have told him. Then he added, since you have met Mr. Tang, go back and apply to the director to check Mr. Tang's information. Shish. Tianchi suddenly touched his lips with his index finger, signaling for silence. On the monitoring screen, Thor stood up and kept talking to the air. Coulson and Hawkeye looked at each other. Could it be that the so-called master of the hammer had a mental breakdown and had hallucinations? But Apocalypse knew that Loki, the god of trickery, should have appeared at this time. Loki is proficient in illusions, and invisibility is just a small skill. But the cold and mysterious energy characteristic of him is very obvious. Although it is very weak, barely present, he has 3 times the power of the Hulk, and his 5 senses have been greatly enhanced, and he can barely detect it. As soon as Loki appeared, he brought a shocking news to Thor, Father is dead. How is that possible? He was still fine when I left. My father's end of life has actually come long ago. In order to rescue us from Jotunheim this time, he used too much divine power. After returning to Asgard, he fell into a coma. When he died, he was very peaceful. Quote, Thor's eyes were wet. I want to go back and attend my father's funeral. Loki shook his head. Exiling you is the condition of the truce with Jotunheim. Mother forbids you to go back. I succeeded as king, and I can't take you back at the risk of a war between the two worlds. I'm just here to inform you. Upon hearing this, the god of thunder twitched and cried, his tall body curled up, as helpless as a child. Not only was he unqualified to be the god of thunder, his father died because of his willfulness, and he almost triggered a war between the two worlds. Thor felt deeply guilty for his naivety and impulsiveness. He was even unable to attend his father's last funeral, which made him extremely sad. However, Thor never expected that all of this was false. He never thought, nor dared to think, that his brother Loki would use this to lie. First of all, God King Odin is not dead at all now, he is just unconscious and recuperating in the medical cabin. Secondly, the Queen of Gods did not prohibit Thor from returning. All of this was a lie told by Loki for the sake of a huge conspiracy. Although Loki's voice cannot be heard, Apocalypse is familiar with the plot, and with the voice of Thor, he roughly knows what Loki said. After a while, Apocalypse sensed this cold energy and left Thor's room and walked outside. Arriving at the place where the hammer was, Loki tried to lift Mjolnir, but found that it didn't work at all. Unexpectedly, Loki seemed to sense a sense of ridicule, and his eyes immediately looked in the direction of Tianchi sinisterly. Apocalypse quickly closed his eyes. When he saw Loki trying to lift Mjolnir just now, he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. It was strange that he could lift it with his character. Unexpectedly, Loki could sense such a weak mental fluctuation. The eyes are the windows to the soul. As soon as Apocalypse closed his eyes, Loki's senses suddenly failed. Apocalypse is not afraid of Loki. Loki's strengths lie in trickery and illusions, and his frontal combat power is actually not very high. In the original plot, during the battle in New York, the Hulk beat him up. Later, when they arrived at Sakaar, Loki saw the Hulk in the Colosseum and was so frightened that he wanted to turn around and run away. One can imagine how much psychological shadow the Hulk left on him. He has 3 times the strength of the Hulk and is calm-minded. Even if Loki has illusions, he is not afraid. But, now is not the time. Of course, if Loki came over on his own initiative, that would be another matter. Fortunately, Loki hurried back and didn't want to cause any trouble, so he didn't come over to check and escape the disaster. Apocalypse's weird behavior frightened Coulson. Seeing that Tianchi was so cautious and still kept silent, he seemed to have met his opponent. Even monsters like Apocalypse must be careful with their opponents. If a fight breaks out, none of the ordinary people present will be spared. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are not afraid of death, but that doesn't mean they are little fish in the pond who want to become superpowers. Coulson unconsciously pulled out the pistol in his hand and looked around warily. After a while, Tianchi said, "He's gone, put the gun away." Coulson asked, "Who is he?" Apocalypse gave Coulson a strange look. Later, Coulson died at the hands of Loki. The person who just came is the person you will kill in the future. Although before dying, Coulson blasted Loki with an energy cannon, but it didn't help. His life was gone, but Loki didn't suffer much damage. Coulson has dedicated his life to S.H.I.E.L.D. Although he is an ordinary person, he does superhero things with a mortal body. He is a person worthy of admiration. In another timeline, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he survived and became the director, leading another group of heroes to fight against various villains. I just don't know which timeline it is and what Earth it is on. Thinking of this, Tianchi took out a bottle of recovery potion from the storage compartment and handed it to Coulson. You should carry this bottle of medicine close to your body and drink it as soon as you are about to die. Sigh, I don't know if I can save you. In the original plot, Coulson was attacked by Loki and fell to the ground. He could only barely move his fingers and may not have the strength to take the recovery potion. However, it is impossible for me to personally protect a passerby like Coulson. I can only do this to this extent. I hope he is okay. Thank you, Mr. Tang. Coulson squeezed the recovery potion tightly. A strong man like Tianchi would not joke with him like this. There must be some inspiration. My future life and death will depend on this bottle of potion. It's just a pity that with my mortal eyes, I can't see who the killer mentioned by Mr. Tang is. Otherwise, it can be prevented in advance. Since Coulson gave it, Hawkeye, as Black Widow's best friend in life and death, had no reason not to give it. Tianchi left 2 bottles and left without saying anything. Hawkeye and Coulson were left looking at each other. Especially Hawkeye. There are 100,000 reasons why there are no answers in his heart. Coulson, who is he? He is mysterious. When did Natasha find such a husband? Is it true or is it necessary for the mission? Barton, I'll apply to the director first. You guys have contacted him, so you should be able to check his information. After reporting it to the General Administration, a piece of encrypted information was quickly sent over. Hawkeye watched from beginning to end. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he was secretly glad in his heart. No wonder Black Widow and Coulson first asked me if I was dead or alive when they heard that they were fighting Mr. Tang. If Mr. Tang has any murderous intention, even if he has 10 lives, he will not be able to die. At the same time, I can't help but be happy for Black Widow. Natasha, maybe he is your destiny. In the future, if you can solve the problem of having children, you will have no regrets in your life. Apocalypse did not take Thor away, leaving him alone for a while. Although Odin's death is false news, it is also a reflection for Thor, and there is no need to deliberately break it. Someone will take him away later anyway. Sure enough, not long after Apocalypse left, Jane, Daisy, and Eric arrived. Jane couldn't help but feel anxious when she heard that Thor broke into a restricted military area and was arrested. That guy Tang Tianchi also said that he and Saul were friends, and they came together. When something happened, he ran away. Trespassing into a military restricted area is a big or small matter. To put it mildly, it was just a misunderstanding. Civilians didn't know where this place was, so it was normal for them to go wrong. If dealt with more seriously, he might be treated as a spy and taken back for interrogation. No one knows when he will be seen again. Naturally, Jane couldn't let Saul be taken away. After discussing with Daisy and Eric for a while, they came up with a lame reason. He said that Saul was a member of their astrophysics research team and a doctor from Princeton. He accidentally hit his head and was now a little unconscious. The United States is generally more tolerant of scholars and hopes they can muddle through. In order to appear authentic, a fake name badge and some temporarily printed resume information were deliberately made. With everything prepared, I came to pick up someone with these false information. Coulson tried hard to hold back his laughter and asked, Ms. Jane Foster, this gentleman named Saul, is your doctor? Ah, right, but why is he so skilled? Even a dozen of our elite soldiers couldn't stop him last night. Well, he likes fitness, yes, just fitness. Looking at the 3 scholars trying to pretend to be calm, Coulson smiled inwardly. I don't know how they came up with these reasons. Can they defeat a dozen elite soldiers just by exercising? I need to make a phone call to ask for instructions, please wait a moment. Coulson did not avoid suspicion and made the call in front of Jane, Daisy, and Eric. However, instead of calling Director Fury, he called Apocalypse. Mr. Tang, there is a beautiful scholar named Jane Foster who wants to mention the guy named Saul and makes up some lame excuses. Do you have any suggestions? Jane blushed instantly, and the 3 of them looked at each other. Let them go. However, if you make a copy of their research information, it will be of great use in the future. Okay, got it. In the original plot, Coulson went to the town and took away all of Jane's information. He found it very useful, and later asked Eric to work as a consultant for S.H.I.E.L.D. to study the cosmic cube. Due to his arrival, Coulson's attention was completely focused on the hammer, and he missed this episode. Now that Coulson asked, Apocalypse dialed back the plot. Coulson hung up the phone and said, you can take him away. However, as a price, I need all your research materials. Daisy asked cautiously, Sir, is the Mr. Tang you called just now named Tang Tianchi? Yes, yeah, it's him. I knew he was not simple. Is he some big shot? Coulson said. It's not convenient for me to say. Jian said angrily. Humph, if you don't tell me, tell me. I'll ask him face to face later. He is mysterious and must have a conspiracy. Daisy said. Mentor, I don't think Tang is a bad person. Jane said angrily. Shaughnessy, you haven't even fallen in love with him yet, and you're already talking for him. If you dare to talk too much, I won't let you pass the paper. In the original plot, Coulson robbed all of Jane's information and equipment. This was her years of accumulated research effort, and of course she strongly opposed it. Although money was given, in the minds of scholars, research materials are much more important than money. Now, they just want to make a copy in exchange for Saul. Jane and Eric are not that big of a reaction, and they will not delay their research anyway. Soon, Coulson asked his people to copy all the information, and at the same time, arranged for Jane and the others to meet Thor. In fact, Coulson did not imprison Thor, but Thor was still in grief and unwilling to leave. Jane's arrival soothed Thor's injured heart. When Jane heard that Saul said that his father died, but she could not go back to attend the funeral for some reason, she couldn't help but sympathize with him. No wonder he was always acting strangely these days. It turned out that a big change had occurred in his family and he was in a trance. As he left, Thor passed the hammer and stroked it gently. One day, I will prove myself and pick you up again. Coulson, who sent them out, said, "Man, when you come next time, I'm not sure if the hammer is still here." Thor was stunned. "What do you mean? Do you want to transport it? No one can take it except me." "Someone picked it up," Coulson said calmly. "Impossible." Thor didn't believe it. Coulson shrugged and didn't answer. Thor didn't know, which meant that Apocalypse hadn't told him, so Coulson was too lazy to do anything. Is there really a suitable candidate for Thor's hammer on the earth? My father threw the hammer here, waiting for another destined person. Thor, who had just been hit by lies, became less confident. This place is a military area and it is not suitable to stay for a long time. Jane took him and returned to the town first. After Thor left, Coulson looked through Jane's information. He was not a scientist. After sorting it out, he sent it back to the headquarters for professional people to interpret. When I saw the information about that hammer, my pupils shrank. Thor's hammer. Is that hammer Mjolnir? Coulson thought of what Apocalypse said. That's what a hammer is, that's what he is. The one he just let go is the mythical Thor. No wonder the hammer is so magical, and if there is an apocalypse, Coulson is already sure of the answer. Immediately report your findings back to headquarters. The information about the hammer and Asgard was actually collected casually by Jane. After listening to Thor talking about Asgard and being the god of thunder all day long, Jane wanted to find out more about her boyfriend's hobbies and looked up some historical and mythological information. Unexpectedly, these notes were seen by Coulson after being tossed around. After a while, Fury personally called, "Coulson, where is Thor?" "Just left." "How could you let him go?" "Director, Mr. Tang has told me to be polite to the owner of the hammer. Although Thor seems to be an ordinary person now, I dare not force him to stay without authorization." "Well," Fuli pondered for a moment, "you did the right thing. Since Tang knows his identity and has raised the hammer, I'm afraid he knows best what happened. If you take him as the main one, what's the point? Ask his opinion before taking action." Yes. On Apocalypse's side, not long after he returned to the town, he received a huge sum of money, along with a message from Director Fury. The content was very simple. Ask him to take action. In the original plot, this incident only affected a small town and did not threaten the Earth. But Fury doesn't know. When he saw that the matter involved gods, and the hammer fell to the ground, the god of thunder lost his power. There were various signs that the world in the myth was not peaceful. With his cautious character, he naturally had to make arrangements in advance. Now on Earth, there is no more suitable candidate than Apocalypse. This time we were facing gods, and it was difficult to estimate the level of combat power. After all, the stories in myths and legends were too distorted, and it was difficult to evaluate the true strength of gods. Fury only hopes that the monster Apocalypse can be as powerful as a god. The town was rarely quiet for 2 days, and everything was calm. In grief, Thor got drunk every day, and Jane was always by his side. But Tianchi knew that when Loki, who was far away in another country, finished his work, something big would happen soon. The last time Loki left in a hurry, he was rushing to Jotunheim to meet the frost giant king, Laufey. When Thor and his group broke into Jotunheim, he discovered that he was not an Asgardian but a frost giant. During battle, as soon as the skin comes into contact with other frost giants, their bodies will immediately turn into the same icy blue color. After the god king Odin rescued them, Loki went to the weapons depot and found the source of the frost giant's power, verifying his racial identity. Seeing Loki's actions, the god king had no choice but to confess to him. Actually, you are the son of Laufey, the king of the frost giants. Then, the god king came and spoke. During the war between the two realms, the god king invaded the frost giant's temple and found an abandoned child, so he adopted him. As for why the frost giant king's son was left behind in the temple, then how did the god king confirm Loki's life experience? Odin did not explain further. Loki was furious and had a quarrel with the god king. The main point of his questioning of the god king was that he actually believed that he was not his biological child, so the god king and god queen have always preferred Thor, the god of thunder, over the years. In front of Odin, he is more like a child vying for favor. He couldn't inherit the throne, not because he was not good enough, but because he was an adopted son, so he passed the throne to the reckless Thor. During the quarrel, the god king Odin fell to the ground weakly. His lifespan has expired and he may be annihilated at any time. Finally, the god king sleeps in the medical cabin. After hearing the news, the Queen of Gods came to comfort Loki and said, "I'm hiding this from you because I don't want you to feel like an alien. We love you as much as we love Saul." However, how could Loki, who was paranoid and petty-minded, listen to this? A country cannot live without a king for a day. As the only prince left in Asgard by god King Odin, Loki temporarily inherited the throne. Loki is known as the god of trickery. Out of jealousy and anger, he came up with a plan. He first went to Earth to meet Thor, told a big lie to prevent Thor from returning, and then came to Jotunheim again. During the last thunder god coronation ceremony, he helped the frost giants sneak across and told the frost giants how to enter the weapons depot, in order to prevent Thor from being crowned. The arsenal contains the frost giants' treasure, the source of power. With it, the frost giant clan can be revitalized. Therefore, as long as there is a slight possibility, even if the frost giant knows that it is a pit, he will jump into it. Loki gets his wish, and commotion interrupts the coronation ceremony. The effect was even better than he expected. Thor was exiled. Now he comes to negotiate with the frost giants again, saying that he will lead the frost giants to attack Asgard. Frost giant King Laufey asked, "You are the king of Asgard, why do you want to cooperate with us?" He, Loki sneered, "As we all know, I was able to inherit the throne because Odin suddenly fell into a coma and Thor was exiled. Once my dear brother returns, the throne will be returned." Ha 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 ha. Laufey laughed, "Do you want me to kill Thor?" "No, I will kill Thor myself. I want you to help me put on a show." "What drama? You attack Asgard and then pretend to be repulsed by me. In this way, I can gain enough prestige and become a legitimate king. HMPH, we, the people of the frost giants, have to sacrifice a lot to play this show with you. What can you do to impress me?" Source of power. Laufey's tall body leaned forward and roared, "Lie." The team that sneaked into the weapons depot last time got the information that the weapons depot contains the destroyer left by Odin, and no one can steal anything from it. "Hey, you forgot, I am the king now. The destroyer obeys the king's orders, I will transfer him away." Frost giant King Laufey stared at Loki in the audience, his thoughts changing rapidly. The whole plan seems very reasonable. In order to stabilize the throne, Loki uses the power of the frost giant, and the frost giant can get back the source of his ancestral treasure. It's a win-win situation, except for Thor. The frost giant king never expected that Loki had an even stranger conspiracy. Even Laufey didn't know that the new king of Asgard in front of him was actually his son. Loki, on the other hand, had no intention of acknowledging his relationship. Instead, he looked at Laufey gloomily, waiting for him to take the bait. Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, wanted to know what Loki had talked about with the frost giants. Unfortunately, he could not see or hear everything Loki said. He knew that Loki had found a way to block his observations. Then, it is clear who helped hide the frost giant team from him last time and smuggled into Asgard. But now that Loki is the new king, he has neither the strength nor the evidence to dare to act rashly. At this moment, Thor's best friend team, Valkyrie Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg and other 4 people, dissatisfied with Loki's rule, took advantage of Loki's departure to come to find Heimdall, coming to Earth to find Thor. Heimdall used the Rainbow Bridge to send 4 people to Earth. The moment the Rainbow Channel opened, S.H.I.E.L.D. instantly detected powerful spatial fluctuations. Coulson hurriedly called Tianchi. Mr. Tang, we have detected a new wormhole. Apocalypse thought for a while and realized that this was Sif and others coming to find Thor, so he said, if there are 4 people coming, you don't have to worry about it. Don't conflict with them. Tell them that the person they are looking for is in the town. If it's a giant metal humanoid machine, please run away as far as you can. Leave the rest to me. Coulson nodded cautiously. Understood. The wormhole opened, and a rainbow of light spanned the distant stars and descended on the Earth. The dazzling 7-colored divine light illuminated the surrounding area, making it difficult to see. When the colorful divine light dissipated, a huge ancient rune appeared on the ground. The hot energy burned the sand into gray-black crystals, with 4 people standing in the middle. Asgardian god warriors, Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg, are here. The 4 of them walked out of the rainbow teleportation rune, and Coulson was already waiting for them in the distance. Coulson said, are you here looking for someone? The person you are looking for is in a small town, just 50 kilometers east of here. Sif asked strangely, how do you know we are looking for someone? Who are we looking for? Coulson said, a strong man told me, I am just a messenger. Is it Saul? No, Thor has lost his divine power. He shouldn't be considered a strong person now. How can you say that about Thor? He is our prince after all. I'm just discussing the matter, not scolding him. Sif stopped her. Okay, stop arguing. Go find Thor first. Don't you understand everything? A group of 4 people soon arrived in the town. The medieval costumes of Sif and others attracted the attention of passers-by. Especially Sif, who is tall, wears dark yellow leather armor, and carries a long sword. She has a heroic aura, and her appearance and temperament are much better than many big stars. Nowhere in this remote part of the town have I seen such an outstanding beauty, but any man would not be able to take his eyes away. Sif was minding her own business, not caring. To people on Earth, they are gods. The gods don't need to care about what the ants think. Thor has become quite a celebrity in the town recently. After some inquiring, Sif and others found Thor in the bar. Saul, Thor followed the sound and said happily, hey, it's you. Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg, why are you here? Several people hugged each other. When the joy of meeting calmed down a little, Sif said, we want to ask you to go back and be our king again. We don't trust Loki. The god of thunder shook his head. My mother doesn't allow me to go back. I can't go back. I'm not qualified. The 4 people from Exif asked in confusion, who said the queen will not allow you to go back? She is always looking forward to your return as soon as possible. After a confrontation, everyone realized that Loki had told a big lie. Thor is furious. He wished he could go back to Asgard right away and teach this wayward brother a lesson for how dare he tease his elder brother like this. At this time, Thor still regarded Loki as his younger brother in his heart, and did not realize how destructive the god of trickery was. But he hasn't gotten back Thor's hammer yet, and without the divine power to add to it, it's useless to go back. Guys, as much as I'd like to go back, I'm not qualified yet. Fandral said angrily, are we going to let Loki be the king forever? He will destroy Asgard. Hogun said, when we came here, Heimdall told us that Loki went to Jotunheim. It's probably not a good sign for the new king of Asgard to go to the frost giant's lair. Everyone discussed for a while and found that there was really nothing they could do against Loki for the time being. The 4 Sifs are just subordinates and cannot openly disobey Loki, let alone drive Loki from the throne. Only Odin, son of God, the god of thunder, can fight for the kingship openly and honestly. The problem is that now that Thor has no divine power, it may be dangerous to go back. The god of thunder said, ignore all this for now. It's good to know that my father is not dead. It doesn't take more than a day or 2. Let's drink first. Come on, let me introduce to you the friend I met on Earth, Tang Tianchi. Only then did the 4 of them notice the Oriental man who had been smiling and saying nothing next to them. Sif and others greeted politely. Earthlings can live no longer than 100 years and are no longer strong enough to weigh 100 pounds. In the eyes of Asgardians, they are naturally not on the same level. Being able to say hello to a few people is already in the name of Thor. Thor saw what Sif and others were thinking and said, "Don't look down on him. I fought with him and ended up getting 2 panda eyes." Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg and others were shocked. Is this Oriental man so powerful? Then he thought about it. The god of thunder has lost his divine power, so he is only a little stronger than ordinary people on earth, and it is not that big of a skill to beat him. But Hogun's violent temper could not be tolerated. "You dare to hit our Prince of Asgard, you are so brave." Tianchi smiled. "My skills are inferior to others, I deserve to be beaten." Apocalypse's words suddenly stung a hornet's nest, and even the gentle Sif slowly drew out her sword, preparing to judge this earthling for insulting the prince. Tianchi stood up and said, "It seems that if you don't do it once, you can't be good." The god of thunder laughed and said, "Hey, Tang, I don't have divine power, so I can't take revenge myself for the time being. But they are my subordinates, and if they beat you, it will be considered as me beating you, haha." Knowing that his father was not dead, Thor was in a great mood, and his funny nature began to fail him again. Tianchi shrugged. "Then if I hit them, it will be the same as hitting you in the face." Hogun had the most irritable temper. He immediately pulled out his mace and was about to start fighting. Thor stopped us and said, "Let's go outside the town and don't destroy other people's homes." Although these people are not peak powerhouses at the level of Thor, they are Asgardians after all. If they start a war in the center of the town, I am afraid that the entire town will be destroyed. Came to the outskirts of the desert. Hogun rushed up brandishing his mace. "Let me teach you a lesson first." There was a soft, pop, sound, and the mace was directly grabbed by Apocalypse, unable to move. The wolf fang spikes that can pierce steel plates can't even pierce Apocalypse's skin. "Come on together. Don't waste time." Looking at this move, Sif and others finally realized that the Eastern man in front of them was probably not a simple man, and they did not dare to be careless. They each drew their weapons and surrounded him. Sif's sword is the most flexible and she mainly attacks the front. Hogun used the mace hammer, and Fandral used the meteor hammer to contain them from both sides. Volstagg is physically strong and wields a large sword, striking from the back. In an instant, the most reasonable attack formation was formed. Apocalypse nodded secretly. They were indeed the most elite team under the Thunder God. Those who could kill the Frost Giant's lair were certainly not too weak. However, that's what makes it interesting. Apocalypse flashed out of the attack range on the left, right and back, and punched Sif. Sif held the sword in front of her, holding the hilt with one hand and pressing the tail of the sword with the other. Apocalypse felt as if his punch hit a spring, and the sword bent into a semicircle. With a bang sound, the sword rebounded, and Sif slid back dozens of meters, taking away the power of the punch. Asgard's divine warrior is indeed not that simple. Just from this punch, you can see the clues. He is much more flexible than the opponents Apocalypse encountered before. Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg were behind to attack, and 3 weapons, including maces, bolas, and great swords, were attacking behind Apocalypse. Apocalypse stretched out his fingers and clamped Volstagg's sword between 2 fingers. Volstagg's eyes widened in fear. How could this be possible? The meteor hammer struck in a strange trajectory, and Tianchi turned his head to avoid the meteor hammer. At the same time, with a flick of his fingers, Volstagg's sword came out and hit Hogun's mace. There was a crisp metal collision, and the sword flew far away. Hogun's hand was numb from the shock, and he almost lost his mace. In just a few rounds, the 4 of them retreated, their weapons dropped, and the attack suddenly stalled. Hogun put away his bad temper and said, "No wonder you can punch Thor with 2 panda eyes. With such strength, you really have the confidence to be crazy." The god of thunder rolled his eyes. This guy really doesn't care about the pot. Sif trotted back and formed an encirclement again. This time, they no longer dared to underestimate Tianchi. A flame slowly lit up on Sif's sword, and it seemed to be alive, flowing along the blade. The weapons of Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg also lit up with yellow light, preparing to use the unique power of the Asgardian god warriors. "Ah!" Exif scolded her and stabbed Apocalypse with her long sword. Before the sword reached him, the skin on Apocalypse's chest felt hot, and a small piece of it was burned. Ha 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 ha, okay, Tianqi laughed, this is the battle I want. Before this, the battles Apocalypse encountered were all physical attacks, and his physical strength has been proven to be even better than that of top powerhouses like Thor. Only these non-physical attack methods such as divine power, spells, and magic have not been encountered yet. Today, let's take a look at what's so weird about these attacks. Apocalypse wanted to do the same thing, pinching Sif's sword between his fingers. Unexpectedly, Sif refused to dodge and retreated, and swung her long sword straight down. She could hold back the power of Volstag's sword before, but it was like a mud cow entering the sea, and it was weak. Sif's long sword cut straight down, breaking Apocalypse's hand. A crack extends from the index finger and middle finger to the wrist. If it hadn't shrunk quickly, it would have almost cut off half of the palm. Fortunately, Tianqi's resilience is amazing. The flesh and blood on both sides were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the muscles seemed to be like living bugs, growing towards each other, trying desperately to pull the flesh and bones on both sides together. The 4 Sifs are all experienced warriors. They will not wait for Apocalypse to recover and then go in one direction to attack Apocalypse. Apocalypse is not in a hurry to determine the outcome. He tries to find ways to attack each other carefully, and carefully feels the attack methods of these divine powers. Sif and others knew that Apocalypse was powerful, but it was not like they had never encountered powerful opponents in their lifetime of fighting. He uses roaming tactics very tacitly and walks away as soon as he touches the enemy. He never competes with Apocalypse in terms of strength. However, Apocalypse's power cannot be easily removed. Often with one punch, the 4 god warriors need to slide hundreds of meters to remove this huge force. For a time, yellow dust filled the sky with a radius of 1 kilometer, loud noises rolled in, and a large crater was blasted out of the ground from time to time by huge power and divine power. It was a spectacular sight of 5 people fighting in a melee with thousands of people. Fortunately, the fight was not in the center of the town, otherwise the entire town would be destroyed. However, it is difficult for 2 hands to defeat 4 punches, let alone facing 8 hands now. As time goes by, Apocalypse has more and more scars on his body. Upon seeing this, Thor shouted, "Brothers, don't kill him, he is my friend on Earth." Apocalypse smiled. "Thor, there's no telling who will show mercy." After saying, bang, he disappeared in place. Apocalypse's unique skill, Supersonic Extreme Attack. This is the attack method I learned at the last Hammer Conference, making full use of his terrifying power and abnormal physique. Unless the person being attacked can react at supersonic speed, they will only get beaten. The first one to be attacked was Fandral, who was holding a meteor hammer. The 2 meteor hammers flew into the air, and Apocalypse forcibly grabbed one with one hand, holding the chain, and tied Fandral into a circle. The reason why Apocalypse took down the meteor hammer first was mainly because the weapon was flying around with a weird trajectory, making it difficult to judge the direction of the attack, so he had to deal with it first. Looking at his hands again, the defense that could not be penetrated by cannonballs was actually punctured with several bloody holes by the spikes of the meteor hammer with the blessing of divine power. It seems that Asgard can rule the 9 realms, and the strength of the divine warriors cannot be underestimated. Seeing that the situation was not good, Sif shouted, "Lean back." The remaining 3 people quickly moved back to form a defensive formation with no blind spots. Tianqi tried it. No matter which direction the attack comes from, the person in front can resist it first, and the people on both sides can respond quickly. For a time, there was nothing tactically possible against them, unless crushed with violence. And if their weapons blessed with divine power come into contact, their skin will always be scorched. If the Hulk encountered them, as long as he didn't knock him head on, the Hulk might still be hunted by them. However, what they don't know is that Hulk has a trick up his sleeve. Hulk strikes. Tianqi clenched his fists with both hands and punched the ground. Boom. The earth is cracked. The crack seemed to be alive, and it was heading straight towards Sif and the others. The 3 of them were unsteady on their feet and quickly jumped into the air. It's now. There was a sound explosion at Tianqi's spot, and a big pit exploded on the ground. Hogan and Volstagg saw a flash of afterimage, their weapons flew out of their hands, and they fell heavily in front of Thor. When the dust dispersed, Apocalypse and Sif slowly appeared. Sif's sword was pressed against Apocalypse's heart, but she couldn't make an inch forward, and the hand holding the sword was pinched by Apocalypse. Apocalypse's other hand held Sif's neck and lifted it off the ground. Suddenly, Sif's face turned red. This time, Apocalypse has gained experience. Since he can't hold the long sword blessed by divine power, he just grabs his neck. Isn't it possible that these parts are slippery? It's really slippery. Apocalypse unconsciously touched Sif's jawline with his fingers. How could a woman who spends all day fighting and killing outside have such good skin care? This time, Sif's face turned even redder. Rogue, you. Put me down quickly. Accidentally. Apocalypse let go of his hands, and Sif stopped attacking. Like an ordinary person, she kicked Apocalypse before running back to Thor. Tang, no wonder you said that I might not be your opponent if I take back Mjolnir. I really have crazy strength. How can people on Earth be so strong? Thor came with 4 divine warriors. Sif, Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg bowed their heads slightly toward Apocalypse, hammered their chests with their right hands, and saluted. This is their Asgard warrior ceremony, and they will give enough respect to the strong. Apocalypse glanced at Sif. The blush on her face had not faded, and she didn't know whether she was pinched or angry. Seeing Apocalypse looking at her and looking at her saluting chest, Sif's eyes glared fiercely, as if to say, "Rogue." Tianchi smiled helplessly. He really didn't mean to tease. At that time, the battle was changing rapidly, so how could he have such thoughts? As for the last touch with my finger, it's all a man's instinct. Thor stepped forward, gave Apocalypse a bear hug, and said, "Father invites you to Asgard as a guest. It seems that he has more vision than me. When I pick up Thor's hammer, come back to Asgard with me. Let's have fun. However, Father may not be able to receive you." Quote. Sif and others were shocked. The man in front of me was actually invited as a guest by the God King himself. What's the origin? No wonder he was so powerful. It seemed that he had not lost unfairly this time. There was still a little bit of dissatisfaction, but now it completely dissipated. Thor, don't worry, you'll get the hammer back soon. Thor sighed, I hope so, but I have no clue. Just as he was talking, a strong wave of energy came from a distance. The people present were all top experts, so they naturally felt it. In the distance, dark clouds gathered, the sky cracked, a black tornado descended from the sky, and sand and rocks flew from the ground. Rainbow Bridge. Thor asked. Sif, besides you, who else is here? The 4 god warriors shook their heads. I don't know, we didn't tell anyone. Soon, they had an answer. The colorful light dissipated, and a humanoid machine several stories high appeared in the teleportation rune. Destroyer. The destroyer seemed to be a stack of metal rings stacked up to form a human shape. The body was glowing with a dark black metallic luster. There were 2 large holes on the face, but there were no eyes, and it was a hollow darkness. If it stands still, it looks more like a work of art. But now, the face of this work of art opens, and a hot flame spurts out. Kill people on sight and destroy buildings on sight. Wherever it passed, houses were blown up, cars flew over, and flames shot into the sky. In the original plot, when Coulson saw the arrival of the destroyer, he still didn't know whether to live or die. He held a broken loudspeaker and shouted, "You are using an unauthorized weapon. Show your identity." As a result, the destroyer ignored it and directly blasted down the flames of destruction. Countless cars were destroyed on the spot, explosions occurred everywhere, and an unknown number of agents were killed. Coulson survived because he hid quickly. But with Tianchi's warning, as soon as he saw this humanoid machine appearing, he had already told his men to run far away and escape this disaster. Apocalypse knew that Loki, far away in Asgard on the other side of the universe, had finally taken action against Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge. He used the source of the Frost Giant's power to freeze Heimdall, seize control of the Bifrost, and send the destroyer to Earth. With Loki's character, there is no such thing as not hurting the innocent. Suddenly, the town screamed and everyone fled. Oops, Jane and the others are still in the town. Everyone, go back quickly. Thor said urgently. Sif asked, who is Jane? Tianchi said, her girlfriend. Hearing this, Exif couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Sif has always had a secret affection for Thor, a bit like Pepper Potts and Iron Man. For so many years, she has been hoping that Thor will respond. Even in Thor 2, God King Odin couldn't stand it anymore. On the eve of Thor's coronation, he personally said to Thor, "Human life is fleeting and not worth worrying about. You should cherish the people in front of you." Then he looked at Sif in the distance. However, Thor still did not respond, which made Sif extremely disappointed. In the subsequent plot, Sif never appeared in Asgard again, and she didn't know where she went. Not being able to love is the most painful thing in the world. Now that the situation was urgent, Sif had no choice but to put her mood away and rush to the destroyer with everyone. Entering the town, Thor assigned a task to the four-man team. "I am immortal now and cannot accompany you to fight. You go and hold back the destroyer. I will assist the mortals in the evacuation." Then he said to Tang Tianchi, "Tang, I'm so sorry, we Asgard have brought disaster to the earth." Tianchi said, "It's not your fault. I know the person behind this is Loki, and I will settle the score with him." The 5 soldiers were divided into 2 groups. Thor went to find Jane, while Apocalypse, Sif and others faced the destroyer. Sif ran to the side and said, "You attract fire from the front." Fandral, Hogan, and Volstagg stepped forward and shouted, "For Asgard." Unfortunately, the sound was loud, but they were vulnerable, and a blast of flames from the destroyer drove them back. But it also gave Sif a chance. She was seen jumping high with the help of the building, and inserted a spear into the destroyer's neck from behind. The destroyer, originally full of red flames, slowly extinguished, and Sif stepped on the destroyer's back, smiling confidently. Tianchi secretly said that something was not good. "I saw the metal circles all over the destroyer's body slowly rotating. In the blink of an eye, the back turned into the front, and a powerful flame was about to erupt." Boom! With a loud sound, Tianchi disappeared on the spot. At the moment when the destroyer erupted, he held its huge head and twisted it hard, and the huge flame pillar passed by Sif. Sif broke out in a cold sweat, said, "Thank you," and quickly jumped off the destroyer. The destroyer's circle rotated again, and the head held down by Apocalypse turned into feet. The original feet slowly rose up and turned into a head shape. The tall body looked down at Tianchi. Boom! Apocalypse curled up into a ball, jumped up high, and hit the destroyer's chest directly. The huge impact force made it unable to maintain its balance, and it fell to the ground hard. "After so many days, I can finally take action with all my strength." Tianchi smiled evilly. Roar! It was as if an ancient monster was resurrecting, like an ant-sized Apocalypse, roaring at the tall destroyer. The destroyer swung a punch, but Apocalypse was not afraid and punched him as well. Boom! There was a loud bang. A circle of white ultrasonic shock waves visible to the naked eye was scattered in all directions. Sif, who was the closest, hurriedly raised her sword and knelt down to resist the ultrasonic shock wave. Even so, her figure still couldn't stop sliding backwards, and she didn't stop until she had retreated more than 30 meters. Wherever the ultrasonic shock wave passed, all the glass in the town burst, and no one was spared. Sif, Fandral, Hogan, Volstagg and others looked at each other with shock in their eyes. Is this the strength of that earthling? In the battle with us just now, he didn't show his full strength at all. If he had attacked with all his strength from the beginning, the 4 of them would not have been able to block even one move. It was more like teasing us by deliberately beating him for so long. Thinking of teasing, Sif thought of Tianchi's fingers touching her face, and couldn't help but feel a little complicated. Ha 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 ha, it's worthy of being produced by Asgard. It just resists being beaten. Tianchi suddenly became heroic and took action wantonly. Since gaining 3 times the power of the Hulk, he has never really used his full strength to fight. When fighting the Abomination Giant and the Hulk, although they were 1 against 2, the opponents were too weak and they all fell down without using all their strength. This time I met an opponent who was strong enough and didn't worry about killing the opponent, so I could finally let go. Under the excitement of the mood, the blood in the whole body is rushing and boiling, and a faint, gurgling sound can be heard. Boom, 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 boom. Each punch is 3 times the power of the Hulk, and each punch triggers a circle of ultrasonic waves. With one blow, the area was almost reduced to a vacuum, which was quickly filled with the surrounding air. Violent air fluctuations made the battle area look like a level sandstorm. The surrounding dust and gravel rose and fell regularly with the sound of explosions. The gravel shot out as more powerful than bullets, and it shoots directly through walls and billboards. In the fighting area, huge flames of the destroyer were sprayed out from time to time, houses collapsed, and rubble flew everywhere. Sif and others wanted to come up to help, but found that they couldn't even get close. As soon as he took 2 steps, he was pushed out by the aftermath of the battle, not to mention defending against gravel and destructive flames. Fandral said, "Sif, retreat. We can't help in this level of battle. Everyone go and protect Thor." "It is good." The 4 people quickly met Saul. Apocalypse, on his side, exchanged countless punches with the destroyer, and found that although he could knock the destroyer down, he couldn't defeat him. These dark metals don't seem to be very hard, and even Sif can pierce them, but in an instant, they are all restored without even a trace. As expected of the guards guarding the treasure trove of Asgard, they are indeed miraculous. As for the flames sprayed from the destroyer's face, although it was powerful, Apocalypse was not afraid of it. There was really too much movement. Before the eruption, the entire body glowed red from the metal circle, and even a blind person knew that it was about to make a big move. It's okay to deal with ordinary warriors, but it has little effect against strong men like Tianchi who can burst into the speed of sound at any time. Now it seems that if we want to completely kill the destroyer, physical attacks will no longer work. We can only use divine power, magic and other means. Just now, Sif's simple stab caused the destroyer to temporarily extinguish the flames. It seemed that divine power was at work. The problem is, these apocalypses don't know how to do it. Sif and others did have divine power, but they were too weak and couldn't even enter the battle circle, so they couldn't help. In the original plot, it was Thor who sacrificed his life, awakened his divine power, and finally destroyed the destroyer with the help of Thor's hammer, Thor. Faced with the stalemate in front of him, Tianchi thought of the butt of the United States for no reason. Bah, it was the classic line of the Captain of the United States. "This way I can fight all day long." Loki, who was far away in Asgard, watched this scene through the Rainbow Passage, holding the Rainbow Bridge Guardian sword slightly in his hand. Since when has there been such a monster on Earth? And he is still helping Thor, Sif and others. If this person is not eliminated, he will be in even more trouble when he comes to Asgard in the future. Loki smiled evilly. Since one doesn't work, then two. Suddenly dark clouds gathered in the sky of the small town, the sky cracked, and the scene when the destroyer came reappeared. The second destroyer has arrived. Unlike the first destroyer who destroyed everywhere, the second destroyer came straight to Apocalypse as soon as it appeared. A flame shot out from dozens of meters away. Just as Apocalypse was about to dodge, the destroyer who was approaching suddenly surrounded him with a pair of giant hands. 2 hands were not enough, so the destroyer's feet transformed into 2 hands. 4 strange hands trapped Tianchi in place. Tianchi is secretly shocked. Will these 2 destroyers cooperate? Before the second destroyer came, the first destroyer could only fight with him, and he had never made such a strange move. Bang 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 bang, with 4 punches in a row, Tianchi blasted away the 4 giant hands. But with just such a delay, the flames of destruction have arrived. The huge pillar of fire instantly drowned Apocalypse. The thunder god in the distance shouted anxiously, "Tang, get out of the way." This was not over yet. The first destroyer emitted flames again, and the 2 flames came one behind the other, immobilizing Apocalypse. Where the flames intersect, a flame ball is formed, growing larger and larger, and finally reaches the limit. Boom! The flame ball exploded, and the flames swept across a kilometer radius like a wave. Wherever it passed, the wood turned into coke, the steel burned red, and the entire town suddenly turned into a sea of flames. Fortunately, because the apocalypse lasted long enough, the crowd had already evacuated, otherwise there would have been countless civilian casualties from this attack. Along with the explosion, there was also a charred corpse, which was Apocalypse. By coincidence, Apocalypse's corpse rolled in some weird trajectories and landed right in front of the God of Thunder. Fortunately, no one was thinking about whether the trajectory of this corpse complied with the laws of mechanics. Thor, a strong man, finally couldn't help it, and lay on the ground, tears dripping down onto Tianchi's body, and said, "I'm sorry. Tang, my friend, it's all because of me. My arrival has given me you have brought disaster. Thor stood up and said to Sif, let's go. You must return to Asgard alive and stop Loki. How about you? Thor's expression suddenly calmed down and he said, don't worry, guys, I have a plan. After saying that, he walked towards the two destroyers with a tragic expression. On Tianqi's charred corpse, he quietly opened one eye and finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the God of Thunder walking forward. The plot is finally dialed back. When the second destroyer comes, although Apocalypse is not sure whether he can defeat him, he can escape. But it also gives Tianqi a warning. In the original plot, there was only one destroyer. In order to save the residents of the town, Thor stepped forward and faced the destroyer in his mortal body. To be honest, as the son of Asgard, being able to sacrifice one's life for ordinary people on Earth is indeed full of compassion. Apocalypse only cares about playing well, but he didn't expect the butterfly effect to occur. If this continues, he will miss the plot of Thor's awakening. If Thor does not awaken, I don't know what direction the butterfly effect will lead to in the future. Now that the second destroyer has arrived, let's just go with the flow and pretend to be defeated and die. Apocalypse was still afraid that the stimulation was not enough, so when he threw the corpse, he quietly used his fingers to use force on the ground, and it just hit the God of Thunder. The good friend who used to drink heavily and fight as much as possible turned into ashes and fell in front of his eyes. The excitement was overwhelming. No one noticed Tianqi's little thoughts, but he couldn't help but open one eye. The coke on the outer skin fell off and made a little, clicking, sound. Exif, who was attentive, noticed this subtle movement, looked around casually, and happened to meet Apocalypse's eyes. Suddenly, the two eyes looked at each other, and the situation was a bit awkward. Thor, on the other hand, approached the two destroyers with grief and anger. The destroyer looked at Thor motionless, without attacking, waiting for instructions from another world. Loki, I know you're looking at me. Is this what you want? Killing civilians, hurting innocents, what good will it do to you? If you want to kill, kill me. Otherwise, when I return to Asgard, I will teach you a lesson, brother. The crowd in the distance didn't dare to breathe, and the town suddenly fell silent. Apocalypse, who was as powerful as a monster just now, was killed by two destroyers. Seeing the God of Thunder coming forward to provoke, many people couldn't bear to look directly, spread their fingers and covered their eyes. Suddenly, Destroyer number 1 waved his giant hand, and the huge force knocked Thor away and threw him high into the sky. Boom! A bolt of lightning suddenly flashed, and the God of Thunder's body stood still in the sky. Countless thunder and lightning appeared in the void, surrounding the body of the God of Thunder, emitting a dazzling white light. Thor, Resurrection. In the original plot, Thor was beaten until he faked his death, and finally he was moved by Mjolnir, and with the help of the power of thunder and lightning, he finally revived. Now, because the excitement of the apocalypse is so overwhelming, the divine power has been awakened without the need for Thor's hammer. Thor, the God of Thunder and Lightning, does not necessarily need a hammer to have the power of thunder and lightning. Looking at Thor standing in the void, Jane could no longer close her mouth. Oh, my God. I always thought that there was something wrong with my brain, and my silly and handsome boyfriend turned out to be a god. It turns out that what he said all along was true. The expressions of Daisy, Eric and others were not much better than hers, and they stood blankly on the spot. The God of Thunder opened his hands and held them from a distance. Thor's hammer, 50 kilometers away, soared into the sky, accelerating all the way. In an instant, it broke through the speed of sound, dragging a long ultrasonic shock-wave tail, and returned to Thor's hand with a bang. As for the complete form of the God of Thunder, he finally merged into one. Suddenly, the thunder and lightning became more intense, so fast that the people on the ground could hardly open their eyes. The clouds in the sky moved with the wind, slowly forming a huge tornado vortex, and the God of Thunder was right in the middle of the vortex. I, Thor, son of Odin, represent Asgard and destroy you. The God of Thunder descended from the sky, carrying a huge force of thunder and lightning, and headed straight towards the destroyer on the ground. In the original plot, Thor relied on this ultimate move to penetrate the destroyer with the power of thunder and lightning, completely eliminating its vitality. But due to the butterfly effect of the apocalypse, two destroyers came, and the situation suddenly changed. Locked by the God of Thunder, the two destroyers were unable to escape and suddenly hugged each other. The metal circles on the body are layered on top of each other and constantly rotating. In the blink of an eye, a higher and more powerful combined destroyer is formed. The combined destroyer raised his hands and faced Mjolnir. Boom! The tornado cloud trembled and was almost scattered. Although the fusion destroyer was beaten down and almost fell down, it was not fatally injured. The metal circle kept spinning and recovered. The god of thunder was startled. He did not expect the combined destroyer to be so powerful. He raised his body again and entered the tornado cloud. Suddenly, there was thunder and lightning in the dark clouds, the light became brighter, and the dark clouds expanded to cover the entire town. The tornado is getting bigger and bigger, like a giant dragon sucking water, sucking up the sand and rocks on the ground into the air. The town that had been beaten to pieces now had no leftovers left, everything was sucked away. The town residents watching from a distance didn't know whether to cry for losing their home or to be grateful that they could see gods in their lifetime. This time, the god of thunder descended from the sky again with more thunder and lightning. The combined destroyer raised his head to the sky, his face suddenly opened, and a destructive flame that was 3 or 4 times stronger than the previous single one shot into the sky. The god of thunder did not evade, and the man and the hammer merged into one, like a sharp blade, splitting the flame pillar into 2 and slashing straight down. Thor's hammer was about to approach before his eyes, and the combined destroyer suddenly split into 2. The incomparably powerful Thor's hammer struck directly from between the 2 destroyers. Boom! A deep pit dozens of meters wide exploded on the ground, and all the dust was sucked into the clouds by the tornado, making the entire sky suddenly darker. Although the destroyer, which was divided into 2, was blown away by the explosion, it successfully avoided this fatal move. Taking advantage of the gap between Thor and his ultimate move, he attacked from the left and right, and destructive flames and giant metal hands appeared one after another. For a time, Thor was busy dealing with it and could no longer spare the time to charge up his ultimate move. Thor understood that the 2 big moves just now did not hurt the combined destroyer, so another big move would have little effect. He had no choice but to use the hammer's strange ability to fly up and down and attack left and right to suppress the 2 destroyers. The destroyers are not afraid of physical attacks. Apocalypse's 3 times the power of the Hulk failed to destroy them before, and Mjolnir was also unable to do so. Often when hit with a hammer, the destroyer would be dented and look seriously injured. As the metal circles on their bodies rotated, they returned to their original state. Only the power of thunder and lightning can slow down or interrupt the destroyer's fire attacks, but unfortunately the attacks are not powerful enough to completely eliminate them. The destroyer sometimes merges and sometimes separates, and his attack methods are more than 10 times more sophisticated than when he fought Apocalypse alone. Thor has more than enough flexibility, but not enough offense. For a moment, Thor and the 2 destroyers were in a stalemate, and neither could defeat the other. Jane and Sif looked secretly anxious. What to do now? The 2 metal monsters didn't seem to get tired. When Thor's energy was exhausted, no one could run away. Hey, get up and help Thor get rid of those 2 destroyers. Sif kicked Apocalypse's charred corpse. Fandral, Hogan, Volstagg, Jane, Daisy, and Eric looked at her in horror. Is this fool crazy? He's been burned to a crisp, and you still kick him. Do you have any conscience? Get up quickly. Sif kicked again. Hogan stepped forward and advised, Sif, please don't do this. Brother Tang helped us block the destroyer and delayed time. Death is the most important thing. Let the small grudges in the past be let go. At the same time, he secretly thought to himself that the woman was really stingy. Wasn't it because Brother Tang pinched her neck during the fight before? He still holds grudges even after his death. You must not offend this comrade in the future, otherwise she will definitely hate you until death. Sif shook her head and kicked a few more times. You don't understand, he is just pretending. Hey, get up. Daisy rushed over and stopped in front of Sif with tears in her eyes. You are too narrow-minded. He has been burned to char, and you still won't let him go. Go to the destroyer and show me how to pretend. Daisy had no time to grieve for the Prince Charming in her heart due to the series of events just now. Now that she saw Sif kicking his remains, the grief in her heart suddenly surged up. Everyone scolded Sif in unison, making Sif even more angry. This fool on the ground must have deliberately made me look embarrassed, because he clearly saw you open your eyes just now. Asshole, get up quickly, Thor can't hold it anymore, Sif shouted. Fandral, Hogan, and Volstagg stepped forward, preparing to pull Sif away to prevent her from doing anything inappropriate again, which would really embarrass Asgard. Okay, let you pretend. Anyway, the man's thing is useless if it's burnt, so I'll cut it off. Do you still pretend? With a swish sound, Exif drew a sword flower and headed straight towards Apocalypse. No one could stop him and couldn't help but close their eyes. This was too cruel. Poor brother Tang didn't expect to suffer such a punishment after death. When the sword tip was about to hit, there was a sudden pop sound, and two black fingers accurately clamped Sif's long sword. Tianchi slowly sat up, and the charred and dead skin on his body began to fade away. You were so tired from playing just now, can't I take a rest? No, 7 people shouted at him in unison. In just a few minutes, everyone's mood went up and down like a roller coaster. Now that they saw Apocalypse alive, they were suddenly more angry than happy, and they unanimously spoke out. Tianchi took a look and saw that these 7 people seemed to want to eat him alive, so he quickly left the place of trouble and wrong. Wearing a pair of big pants, he jumped towards the battlefield. That's right, all that's left is a pair of big pants, and they're gold. Chapter 51. Not long ago, he asked Iron Man to help him make some indestructible clothes. Iron Man thought about it, not to mention clothes, even mechas, there was nothing that Apocalypse could not defeat. Finally, he dug out a small piece of vibranium left by his father Howard, stretched it into metal wire, and combined it with some high-tech fiber wire to make a pair of big pants for Apocalypse. After all, Apocalypse wants these clothes so that he won't be as eye-catching as the Hulk in battle. Naturally, priority should be given to clothing with key components. Tianchi hugged him twice. Is it too much for him to knit a pair of underwear as a gift? Unfortunately, there was too little vibranium, so I only made one piece and then it was gone. The outer clothing can only be made of some ordinary tough materials. Normally, it was enough for fighting, but just now the destroyer struck 2 flames of destruction, forcibly burning his clothes into charcoal, leaving only his vibranium underwear. This is also one of the reasons why Tianchi doesn't want to move. It really affects the image of wearing big golden pants to fight in front of 3 beauties. But now Thor can't handle it with 1 against 2, so he pretends to be dead and is discovered by Sif. Helpless, I was put on the shelves. Hee, that's great, Tang, you're not dead. It's just that these clothes. Thor asked while playing. Apocalypse looked at Thor with envy. Just now, Thor was still wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but he transformed. Not only did his power and hammer come back, but his clothes were also changed into bright armor and a cape. It was so handsome. Thor, let me borrow your cloak. I won't borrow it. Thor shook his head firmly. It won't affect your combat effectiveness if you don't wear clothes. If you use my cloak while naked, I will never dare to wear it on my shoulders again. What do you mean naked? Don't I still have a pair of shorts? That's not okay. Apocalypse is helpless. This guy Thor is really not interesting. Isn't a good brother worth a cloak? Fortunately, I had the foresight to make a pair of big pants in advance, otherwise the situation would be embarrassing now. The destroyer noticed that Apocalypse was approaching, and directly blasted him with a blast of destruction flames, dragging him into the battlefield. Court death. Tianchi opened his eyes. Not only did I have no shoes, I even had no clothes to wear. How dare you mess with me? Roar. With a roar, Apocalypse unleashed all his anger on the destroyer. With a sonic explosion, he jumped up high and knocked a destroyer to the ground with his body. Then he hugged its feet with both hands, and the metal body, which was more than 10 meters high, was lifted high by Apocalypse and slammed to the ground. Boom, 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 boom. Destroyer 1 was knocked dizzy by the smash. Although the physical attack could not completely destroy them, it was enough to temporarily lose their combat effectiveness, at least unable to unite. Ouch! Thor suddenly shouted. He was knocked down from the sky and fell to pieces. It turns out that when Apocalypse was carrying the Destroyer 1 and bombarding him randomly, he, accidentally, photographed the passing Thor. Thor was furious. Tang, did you do it on purpose? Boom. Apocalypse smashed the Destroyer again, and took advantage of the opportunity to say, "How can you say that to me? I'm smashing mine here, why are you flying here? You." The god of thunder was at a loss for words, it seemed to make sense, but something felt wrong. "You hurry up and kill the other one. I don't have any magical power, so I can't kill these iron lumps." The god of thunder no longer hesitated, rose high again, and swooped down with the help of the power of thunder and lightning from the clouds. Without combined cooperation, a single destroyer can no longer stop Thor. Mjolnir passed through the head of Destroyer 2 and flew out from the bottom. Countless lightning powers filled the destroyer's dark body. Dots of lightning exploded inside, and after a while, the flames of Destroyer 2 extinguished and slowly fell down. Before Thor's hammer could return to Thor's hand, Apocalypse stretched out his hand. "I'll lend you my hammer." Mjolnir suddenly turned and flew past Thor's hand, flying into Apocalypse's hand. For a moment, Apocalypse was like the second god of thunder, with thunder and lightning all over his body. The tornado thunderstorm clouds in the sky continued to chop down thunder and lightning, providing energy for the hammer. If it weren't for the fact that he was naked and wearing big pants, he would look like the second god of thunder. Boom, 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 boom. He hammered Destroyer 1 dozens of times, flattening the body, and the life inside was completely annihilated by the power of lightning. The Destroyer tried to turn the metal circle to recover, but when he moved a little, there was no sound, and there was dead silence. At this point, the two destroyers were completely destroyed by the combined efforts of Thor and Apocalypse. You can actually hold Mjolnir." Thor couldn't believe his eyes. "No wonder when I said I was afraid of hurting myself, it turned out to be this." No one cares about the destroyer at this time, everyone is looking at Apocalypse holding the hammer. Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg, etc. are all Asgardian warriors, and they know best what it means to be able to hold Mjolnir. Several pairs of eyes stared at the man holding Mjolnir, from initial disdain to anger to now admiration. Sif's eyes changed when she looked at Apocalypse, and Apocalypse's image was once again subverted in her heart. If she weren't wearing a pair of golden pants, her image could be even taller. "Return the hammer to you." Apocalypse threw Mjolnir at Thor. Thor took the hammer with a complicated expression. "I originally thought that I was the only owner of the hammer, but I didn't expect that there was a mistress wearing gold pants outside of it. For a moment, I didn't know what to think." After the war, Coulson led his men to temporarily maintain order and deal with post-disaster reconstruction matters. The god of thunder said, "No wonder my father invited you to be a guest. If I hadn't awakened, would I have made you the god of thunder? How could it be? Aren't you awake now? If. There are no ifs. I don't like to carry a hammer with me. It doesn't fit my image." "Bah, what kind of image do you have, this guy?" Daisy leaned closer and said, "I think this looks very handsome, and the golden underwear also has a lot of personality." Then he looked forward to Tianqi's response. Jane stroked her forehead and was speechless. As an intern, she had completely fallen. "Let's stop talking. Now that the destroyer has been killed, Loki will definitely know. He will definitely speed up the progress of the conspiracy. You'd better think of a way to get back to Asgard." Thor thought the same thing. He could ask about the hammer slowly, but Loki couldn't wait. "I went back too late, and I don't know what Asgard has been like." Thor came over and said to Jane, "I have to go back to fight now, so it is not convenient to take you with me. I promise you that I will be back soon and take you to see the Rainbow Bridge in Asgard. There the scenery is beautiful and spectacular, we could spend the whole day there." Jane said softly, "Then you have to come back quickly and don't leave me behind." Thor, promise Mjolnir." The two were affectionate, talking to each other, and finally had a deep goodbye. Apocalypse looked at Sif, wondering how she would react when she saw the man she had a crush on hugging another woman in front of her. Unexpectedly, Sif was also looking at Apocalypse. There was a moment of glaring, and the atmosphere became awkward again, and finally ended with a fierce glare from Sif. "Why are you staring at me? I'm not the man I kissed you," Tianqi said. Sif was so angry that she didn't know how to react, and turned away with her face flushed. After Thor kissed Jane goodbye, he called Apocalypse, along with Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg and others, stood in a circle and started calling. "Heimdall, Heimdall, 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 Heimdall." Far away in the Asgard Rainbow control room, Heimdall, who was frozen into an ice sculpture by Loki, heard the call and slowly woke up. As the guardian of Asgard's Rainbow Bridge, he has devoted his life to his duties. No matter where people in Asgard are, as long as they call him, they will get a response. Hearing the prince's call at this time, Heimdall opened his eyes, gathered all his strength, and broke free from the ice on his body. There were several Loki confidants in the control room who came around after hearing the sound. Heimdall showed no mercy, raised his sword and killed them all. Then he inserted the sword into the center of the control room and used his last strength to open the rainbow channel. A rainbow of light fell from the sky, and Thor, Apocalypse, Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg and others disappeared. There is only one burning ancient arcane rune left on the desert. Jane, Daisy, and Eric felt lost, looking at the runes for a long time before leaving. The light of the rainbow took 6 people including Thor and Apocalypse through the infinite space and flew towards Asgard. Apocalypse and others flew at high speed in the light of the rainbow. Outside the Rainbow Bridge, countless stars shone, and in an instant, they were left behind. I don't know how many universes and time I have traveled through. I don't know how long time passed, it seemed like a moment, and it seemed like a long time passed. Suddenly, the rainbow light in front of them disappeared, and a group of 6 people appeared in the rainbow control room. In the middle of the rainbow control room, there is a small raised platform with the Guardian's sword on it. It is still connected to the rainbow channel and emits white thunder light. And Heimdall fainted next to the Guardian's sword. He had been frozen by Loki using the source of power before, and his body had been severely injured. After hearing the call, he forcibly broke the ice seal and used up his last strength. Thor hurriedly stepped forward to check and found that he was just unconscious, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He said to Fandral, "You send him to the medical room, and the others will go to the palace with me." Yes, Tianchi hurriedly looked at the control room. The entire control room was resplendent and was a hemispherical dome structure. The walls are covered with circular patterns, layer upon layer, and the patterns are covered with ancient runes. Exiting the control room is the main body of the Rainbow Bridge. The colorful divine light that usually leads the Asgardians to and from various planets in the universe is also called the Rainbow Bridge, but strictly speaking, it is just an energy channel created by the Rainbow Bridge. The main body of the Rainbow Bridge is tens of meters wide and several kilometers long, spanning the Sea of Asgard. One end is the Rainbow Control Room, and the other end is naturally the land of the Kingdom of Asgard. The bridge body is made of dark yellow translucent crystals, and it is unknown what kind of material it is made of. It flashes with colorful divine lights day and night. Looking along the bridge, there were already fireworks in the distance, and the shouts of killing could be heard for miles. The god of thunder was in a hurry. Loki has already taken action. I will go to the palace first, and everyone will follow. With a whoosh sound, he swung the hammer and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Holy shit, Tianchi cursed in his heart, but he took me with him. He can jump very far, but if he doesn't know the specific location of the palace and jumps around rashly with no one to guide him, he will be misunderstood as an enemy. Apocalypse felt that Sif, Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg and others were too slow, so he directly kidnapped Sif. "Give me the direction," said, soaring into the sky. Sif resisted instinctively at first, but then she thought that the overall situation was more important, and she couldn't escape anyway, so I stopped twisting and pointed the way in the air. Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg looked at each other, and their expressions relaxed. With the help of these 2 strong men, the 3 of us no longer have to worry about the palace. If they can't solve it, the 3 of us can't help in the past. Just stop by and clean up the frost giant minions causing damage. Palace of Asgard. God King Odin had a peaceful face and was lying in the sleeping cabin in the dormitory. Queen Frigga was guarding her husband at the door. Whenever she saw the frost giants breaking in, she would draw her sword and fight. However, she majored in witchcraft and was a witch. She was not very strong in frontal combat. As soon as she cut down a soldier, she was slapped aside by the frost giant King Laufey, leaving her unable to resist. Laufey stepped forward, crossed his icy blue hands over the golden energy shield, reached into the dormant cabin, and slowly opened the eyelids of God King Odin. "I know you can still hear and see everything around you. Please remember, the person who killed you is the frost giant king, Laufey. Laufey stretched out his hand, and an ice blade appeared. He raised it high and was about to kill Odin. Suddenly, a divine light appeared behind him, and he was knocked out of the dormant cabin with a bang. Laufey was severely injured and tried to raise his head with a look of shock on his face. It is absolutely unbelievable that the person who attacked him was the god of tricks who colluded with him, Loki. Loki raised the staff again and said with a gloomy face, "The one who kills you is the son of Odin." With a Z sound, another divine light came out, completely killing Laufey. The leader of the clan died inexplicably beside Odin's bed. Laufey never understood why Loki wanted to kill him until his death. What he didn't expect was that Loki was still his biological blood. In his opinion, in order to seize the throne, Loki killed his brother and his father with his own hands, which was very consistent with the cruel and cold character of the god of trickery. This is how a generation of heroes should be. From the perspective of those in charge, this is the most reasonable and logical thing. Unexpectedly, everything Loki did not care about the throne or reputation, but to prove to God King Odin and God Queen Frigga that he was a more qualified and better son than Thor. He even brutally killed his biological father on the spot, and prepared to eliminate the Frost Giant clan, completely severing his bloodline from the past. All the tricks, all the blood, were just to satisfy Loki in performing such a show in front of the God Queen. When Tianchi saw such a plot, he vomited 3 liters of blood. People who are not mentally twisted into twisted ropes cannot do such childish, willful and cruel things. But this is Loki, the god of trickery. Moreover, Queen Frigga, who was knocked aside, was really deceived. She was moved and said to Loki, "You saved your father." Then, he gave Loki a loving hug. There was a smug smile hidden in the corner of Loki's mouth, and he said, "Mother, I swore to you that they will eventually pay the price for their actions. I did it." As soon as he finished speaking, Thor and Apocalypse arrived. Thor shouted, "Loki!" Apocalypse looked around and saw Loki wearing armor, a cape on his shoulders, a golden scepter in his right hand, and a helmet on his head. The helmet is dark gold, with 2 horns standing high on the forehead, bending backwards, showing a strange and majestic look. Compared with the strong Thor, Loki has a slender figure and a handsome face. Combined with his smile, he has an evil beauty. This was his official meeting with Loki. Last time when they were next to Mjolnir, Loki was invisible and couldn't be seen. He didn't show up either. The two of them just sensed each other's presence. God Queen Frigga looked over, let go of Loki, showed a smile, and walked over. "You are finally here." The god of thunder was greatly excited, with tears in his eyes, and he took a few steps forward. "Yes, mother, I'm back." Unexpectedly, Frigga directly past the god of thunder, walked up to Apocalypse, and said, "My husband Odin just invited you a few days ago. I thought it would take an unknown number of years, but I didn't expect that we would meet in just a few days." As he spoke, he held Tianchi's hand affectionately like an elder. The god of thunder was embarrassed on the spot, and a thought flashed through his mind. Was the queen mother beaten stupid by the frost giant? Can even his son admit his mistake? No, you can't think of your mother like this. He walked around to Frigga again and said, "Ahem, mother, I'm here. I'm Thor. The son you miss so much is back." Queen Frigga showed a bit of reproach on her face and said, "I know, I'm over 1,000 years old and I'm still frizzy. Didn't you see that I'm receiving guests? Now that Asgard has encountered changes, the palace is in a mess, which is already rude enough. As a prince, you should treat guests with courtesy." Not only was Lei Shen baffled by what he said, but even Apocalypse couldn't understand it. Even if he can lift Mjolnir, he can still be an ordinary guest, but he won't have to abandon his 2 sons to welcome her formally like this, right? Just him. Thor laughed loudly. "Mom, he is a brother I met on Earth. We drank and had a fight. You don't have to be so polite to him. If we really want to talk about superiority, he is a native of Earth and belongs to We Rule Asgard, and he still wants to salute you." "What do you know?" Queen Frigga scolded. "He is your brother, but that does not prevent him from being our distinguished guest in Asgard. Strictly speaking, he is an Earthling, but not entirely. He comes from a higher dimension, a truer dimension." Frigga pointed to Sif, who was still clamped on Apocalypse's waist, and asked, "This is?" Sif reacted immediately. kicked around like a small fish, and whispered, "Asshole, put me down quickly." Ahem, sorry, I forgot. Sif hurriedly tidied up her appearance and bowed half kneeling to the Queen of Gods. Queen of Gods. Well, get up, Tianchi said. Queen God, I don't quite understand. It is not surprising to say that Queen Frigga can know that she is a person from another world. In the original plot, Thor traveled back through time, and she recognized at a glance that Thor had come back from the future. The Queen God said, "As everyone knows, I have some knowledge of witchcraft and can glimpse some fragments of the future. The last time you fought Odin, your existence was like an indelible mark that suddenly appeared in the long river of Asgard. So I informed Odin and invited you to come up as my guest." No wonder when he picked up Mjolnir, Odin's mental pressure first made him furious, and then his attitude suddenly turned 180 degrees. It turned out to be the Queen Frigga who informed him. "Queen God, can you see my future?" Frigga shook her head. "With my ability, I can only see some fragments of images about Asgard. The moment you came into contact with Odin, the time course of Asgard suddenly changed drastically, completely overturning what I had seen before, have witnessed." Then he said to Thor, "Thor, your brother comes from a different dimension and has a noble status. He is of great help to Asgard. You must not neglect him." The god of thunder said carelessly, "He is my brother, who will help me if he doesn't help me. However, I really don't see what makes him noble." Sif on the side asked, "Queen, is it possible that Tang is an Eastern Protoss?" Frigga glanced at Sif meaningfully. "No. He does not have the Tao charm unique to the Eastern Protoss. He is truly nobler than any other race in the world." "What's true?" Everyone was confused. The cultivation system of the Eastern Protoss is called cultivation. True cultivation does not pursue strong strength. Strength is just a side effect of the cultivation process. Using falsehood to cultivate truth, achieve immortality, and ultimately transcendence, this is their philosophy. Quote, "Each of us lives in some false appearances, and even this world is a false appearance. Some strong people have practiced for thousands of years, just to pursue a little bit of true essence. But Mr. Tang, in fact, is true. The essence is far beyond any strong person I have ever seen. If Mr. Tang is jade, our truth is just smoke at best, not worth mentioning." Apocalypse was a little embarrassed to be praised so much by the Queen of Gods. "Am I that powerful? I can't even kill the destroyer. When it comes to truth and falsehood, Tianchi has some experience. This world, in the past life, was just a fake two-dimensional. I traveled through it myself, but everything was so real. But must past lives be real? Many scientists in previous lives have claimed that judging from various signs, there is a high probability that the universe in which humans live is a holographic simulation. Everything is just a higher dimensional program. The structure of the entire universe is so tight, the constants are so exquisite, and the formulas are so beautiful, they don't look like they were created naturally. If this is the case, the fake self has entered a fake world, and in this fake world, the self is the most real. If there was a chance that people in this world could go back to their previous lives, would it be true or false? How to calculate the truth and falsehood in this? Let's also talk about the theories discussed by some sages such as, there is nothing outside the mind and there is no reason outside the mind, the universe is my heart, and my heart is the universe, and so on. Could it be that these sages have long seen that the world in their previous life was a holographic simulation program? As a result, many cultivators appeared. Some of them may not be strong enough to hold their heads against a brick, but they pursue the true essence throughout their lives. Tianchi just thought about it for a little while, and he felt like he was about to faint. Such a philosophical question is really not suitable for Oedipus. The queen smiled and said, "Mr. Tang, there is no need to worry. I have said that the essence of cultivation is to use falsehood to cultivate, and strength is just an incidental part. With Mr. Tang's true nature, it is not difficult to improve strength. Even Mr. Tang's existence will have an immeasurable impact on our entire universe. Unfortunately, my level is too low and I can't see much." Tianchi said, "Since the Queen of Gods can see the future, why didn't she make preparations for changes earlier? You know, the final outcome. How miserable was Asgard in the end? The god King Odin was annihilated, the god queen was assassinated, and the eldest daughter Hela broke through the seal and came to Asgard to kill them all. In the end, the entire kingdom of Asgard was wiped out by the Minotaur Searcher. The people of Asgard finally escaped onto the spaceship, only to encounter Thanos. Loki died, and Thor, like Odin, became blind in one eye. It is not known whether blindness is hereditary. In the end, only a small part of the bloodline was left to pass on to the earth. The kingdom of God, which once ruled the 9 realms, ended up like this. The God Queen smiled and said, "Asgard is not destroyed, how can it have an ending? If you are talking about those disasters. Alas, everything is the best outcome." Is the Queen of Gods also so fatalistic? Apocalypse is non-committal, but Asgard's fate is still called the best outcome. The Queen of Gods sighed. Many people think that being able to predict the future, peer into the long river of time, and change the future. In fact, there is not much that everyone can do. If you want to force changes, you will get a worse result, or there will be unpredictable forces intervening. Apocalypse thought of the time administration that appeared in Loki. Is this an unpredictable power? If the future is already determined to be unchangeable, then what is the point of Doctor Strange peering into the future and finding the only chance of success from tens of millions of possibilities? Just lie down and let the time administration work tirelessly to maintain the timeline. Doesn't this become fatalism? If it can be changed, what's the point of the existence of the time administration? Tianchi couldn't figure this out, so he simply didn't think about it. At least Apocalypse now knows that when he peeks into the future, he is not omniscient. Like Frigga, he can only see some fragmentary scenes with Asgard. All other things are based on speculation and may not be accurate. Thor saw the Queen in Apocalypse playing riddles, but couldn't understand. He felt impatient. Taking advantage of Apocalypse's silence, he hurriedly said, "Mother, I want to tell you that all this is Loki's conspiracy." Speaking of Loki, Tianchi suddenly became alert. Something is wrong. He and the God Queen had been chatting for so long, but Loki didn't say a word. He was too quiet, which was definitely not his character. Apocalypse stretched out his hand, pulled out Sif's sword, and shot it at Loki with a clang sound. The God of Thunder was shocked and shouted, "Tang, what are you going to do?" I saw the sword quickly passing through Loki's body and nailed to the wall behind. Loki slowly transformed and disappeared. It really is an illusion. With Loki's character, how could he stay still and wait for death when he saw the 2 top powerhouses Apocalypse and Thor coming? Apocalypse didn't know when Loki slipped away. He was afraid that he would have quietly left as soon as he came in. At this time, the colorful lights outside were shining brightly. A strong light shines into the palace. Oops. Apocalypse recalled the original plot and said to Thor, "Loki is going to use the power of the Rainbow Bridge to destroy Jotunheim." The God of Thunder became anxious upon hearing this, and with a wave of his hammer, the man had disappeared. "Queen God, let's talk later." Tianchi said goodbye quickly. Sif hurriedly saluted and followed. Rainbow Bridge. At this time, the Rainbow Bridge was shining brightly, and in the translucent crystal, countless energy rays continued to flow towards the Rainbow Control Room. The circular pointer-like device in the Rainbow Control Room emitted a strong light, crossed the Asgard cosmic sea, and disappeared into the dark void of the universe. The energy level is 10,000 times stronger than during teleportation. No need to guess, this 7-colored divine light must be directed towards the home of the frost giants, Jotunheim. The 7-colored divine light can be strong or weak. If controlled properly, a rainbow channel can be established to transport people to any place in the universe. Now it has been enhanced 10,000 times, and people will be torn into powder as soon as they enter. It is no longer a transmission channel, but a death channel. Over at Jotunheim, divine light suddenly descended from the sky and directly hit the frost giant's temple, causing the mountain to collapse and the earth to collapse. As the energy of the colorful divine light increases, the earth's crust is constantly being turned over. If it is not interrupted, it will penetrate the earth's crust and detonate the earth's core. At that time, the entire Jotunheim will explode like a balloon. "Loki, what are you going to do?" Thor asked sternly. Loki said, "What are you doing? I want to prove to my father that I am worthy of being his son. I saved his life and destroyed the hateful race of frost giants. From now on, I no longer have to worry about the war between the 2 worlds. You are too willful. We are not qualified to decide the survival of a race. Stop it immediately." On Earth, the god of thunder could sacrifice his life for ordinary humans. Now that he saw that a huge race was about to be destroyed, how could he agree? Ha 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 ha, I can't stop anymore. My brother, just wait and see the good show. Thor was furious and struck Loki with a bolt of lightning. Wherever the lightning passed, Loki was disillusioned and was an illusion. The real Loki suddenly appeared behind Thor, and the scepter in his hand emitted a divine light, which almost knocked Thor off the rainbow bridge. Thor flicked his hand and Mjolnir came out. When it hit Loki, he found that it had turned into an illusion. Thor didn't want to get entangled, so he simply rushed directly to the rainbow control room, but was attacked by Loki on the way, and was unable to escape for a while. Tang, go to the control room and pull out the sword of protection. It is good. Apocalypse comes straight to the control room. Suddenly, Loki appeared in front of Apocalypse, holding a scepter in his hand and stabbing towards Apocalypse. Without even thinking about it, Apocalypse suddenly sprouted 8 arms, moving up and down, left and right, back and forth, and threw a series of punches. For a while, there were many afterimages. Except for the 2 legs standing on the ground, the upper body was full of hands. Bang 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 bang. A dense burst of air sounded like firecrackers. Suddenly the hand on the side tightened and touched the entity. Oh, the real Loki fell from the void and slid dozens of meters away. His face was twisted in pain, and a piece of his chest was already dented. You boy, play with illusions in front of me and see if I can't kill you. Apocalypse didn't care to continue the pursuit, let Loki go, and ran to the rainbow control room. At this time, the rainbow control room was dazzling, with a large amount of golden divine light pouring out. Even with his eyes closed, the divine light still shines through his eyelids and reaches his eyes, giving people the illusion of blindness. Tianchi wanted to rush inside, but found that he couldn't rush in at all. The light pressure was too strong at this time, forming a natural energy shield to protect the control room. Apocalypse blocked the front with his hands, burst out with all his strength, and pushed forward step by step. Less than halfway through, the ground loosened, and the hard ground was crushed into powder under the strong pressure. Apocalypse couldn't put any force on his feet and was immediately pushed out. Tried a few more times, but nothing worked. Roar. Since gentleness doesn't work, try violence. Apocalypse exploded with 3 times the power of the Hulk and blasted forward. Unfortunately, although the power is great, hitting it on light pressure is like hitting cotton, which is useless. Apocalypse was secretly shocked. Just a part of the leaked energy was already so powerful. He couldn't even get close to him with 3 times the power of the Hulk. So how terrifying must the energy Jotunheim have endured? Sure enough, in the face of the power that can destroy the planet, human power still seems too small. Thor, I can't get in. Lend me your hammer. As Apocalypse stretched out his hand, Thor felt the hammer in his hand being pulled and quickly let go of the control. Thor's hammer flew to Apocalypse's hand, and his huge strength combined with the power of thunder and lightning, he swung it towards the guardian sword with all his strength. Useless. Although he advanced a little further, he was still ejected by the light pressure, like a cannonball, ricocheting past Apocalypse. Even this won't work, Tianchi cursed secretly. No wonder Loki said he couldn't stop. Now no one can get close to the control room until the energy is exhausted. Tianchi took a few steps back and thought for a moment. It was discovered that there was light pressure in the control room, but not the pointer device outside that emitted the rainbow divine light. This device is a ball, rotating at high speed, with a pointer in front. It is said to be a pointer, but for the planet level, and for humans, it is an extremely large barrel. The rainbow light is emitted from the pointer and disappears into the void in front. In order to concentrate the energy, the spherical device and the hands are well sealed so that no divine light escapes. Apocalypse looked at it, jumped up, flew high, and landed on the side of the spherical pointer. Ah! Apocalypse pressed his hands on the high-speed rotating spherical device. As soon as he pressed it, his flesh and blood were bruised. The Hulk's physique, which could not be penetrated by cannonballs, did not appear very powerful in front of this device. Holding back the severe pain, Tianchi used his hands to forcefully reverse the direction of the pointer and lift it upwards. The thunder god in the distance was shocked and shouted, "Don't." Unfortunately, the high-speed rotating pointer is too noisy, and the surrounding divine light vibrates the void, making it impossible to hear it. The huge light pillar was slowly lifted from the plane of the cosmic sea. Thor is in a hurry. As a brother, I have lived on the earth all my life and have never even been to space. I have no common sense in cosmology. On the earth, the ground is solid and upward is void. Normally, any gun salute or cannon salute will not hit anything if it is shot upward. But in the universe, there is no distinction between the sky and the earth. There are galaxies in any direction. In addition, Asgard is not a planet, but a strange flat continent, which gives the wrong hint to Apocalypse. Moreover, Apocalypse does not understand the properties of the Rainbow Bridge. The rainbow divine light can travel through countless time and space, and will not dissipate at all unless it encounters an entity. Such intense divine light can only be blocked by objects above the planet level. Lifting Apocalypse like this is just transferring the energy that destroyed Jotunheim to some unlucky planet in the universe. As the rainbow pointer was lifted, the divine light slowly crossed the continent on the surface of the planet far away in Jotunheim, leaving a bottomless canyon. Then, the divine light moved out of Jotunheim's planet and toward the void of the universe. Wherever it passed, the void was distorted and the stars were disillusioned. I don't know how many distant and unknown planets have suffered unreasonable disasters. Loki stood in the distance, staring at Apocalypse, with a cold smile on his lips. Thor didn't care about hitting Loki anymore. He waved his hands anxiously and shouted, "Dawn, don't push it." Seeing Thor's gesture, Apocalypse thought it was asking him to work harder, and shouted back, "Come over and help. I can't lift you up." Unfortunately, under the huge, buzzing noise of the spherical device, neither of the two people could hear the other. Thor spins his hammer, trying to fly over and stop Apocalypse. But then I thought about it, it would be useless if the rainbow light does not stop emitting. As long as the rainbow light continues to emit into the universe, there will still be planets that will be unlucky. Thinking of this, Thor raised his hammer high and thought of the only way. Oh, Mjolnir hits the rainbow bridge hard. Tianchi is anxious. Is this guy Thor stupid? I've already changed the plot, why are you still smashing the rainbow bridge? There are still beautiful wives and beauties waiting for me on the earth, and there are many things to do. I don't want to be trapped in Asgard for several years. Could it be that Thor, this guy, feels that his push is not high enough? Then I'll try harder. Ah, Tianchi yelled. Asshole, don't smash it. Too bad Thor couldn't hear it. On the contrary, I saw the divine light pointer moving again in the void of the universe, which made me even more anxious. Oh, idiot, don't push. After the second hammer blow, the rainbow bridge crystal began to crack, and now it was Apocalypse's turn to be angry. Ah, don't smash it. Oh, don't push. Ah, don't smash it. Oh, don't push. Ah, oh, don't want. Do not. Finally, this mutually inaudible quarrel ended with Thor's victory. Boom, the rainbow bridge is broken. The huge energy transmission was suddenly interrupted, the energy was chaotic, and a big explosion occurred on the spot. The Asgard cosmic sea raised huge waves and flooded the rainbow control room. Then the water fell down and continued to disappear into the void. The violent explosion destroyed the rainbow control room, and the spherical device collapsed, fell to the ground, and could no longer rotate. Thor and Loki were thrown high into the sky by this energy that destroyed the world, and Apocalypse was even worse. He couldn't fly in the first place, and now he was falling into the void below the cosmic sea, with no way to use his strength. What's more, the aftermath of the explosion has a powerful impact. The three of them accelerated and fell towards the cosmic sea. Apocalypse saw Sif rushing towards the three of them from a distance. Unfortunately, the aftermath of the explosion was still spreading. After running a few steps, she was swept away by the air wave. The god King Odin, who was sleeping in the palace, suddenly opened his eyes when he heard the explosion. He disappeared from the dormant cabin and turned into a ray of light, flying towards the rainbow bridge. Seeing three people from a distance, Odin pulled two back, one in each hand. And the one left is none other than Loki. Loki couldn't believe it. His father didn't save him, but instead saved that earthling. His eyes were full of unwillingness, anger, resentment, and despair as he looked at Odin, slowly falling into the void and finally disappearing. Asgard's cosmic sea is endless day and night. The water comes from nowhere and goes away from nowhere. Apocalypse doesn't know what is under the cosmic sea, but judging from the reactions of God King Odin, Thor, Loki and others, it is definitely not a good thing, and may even be life-threatening. In the original plot, Odin captured Thor and Loki at the same time. In that situation, Loki still did not forget to quarrel with the God King. In the end, he was so angry that he chose to let go and fell into the void. Then somehow he hooked up with Thanos and returned to Earth to cause trouble. But now, it was not that he chose to let go, but that the God King gave up on him. One can imagine how deep the resentment in his heart will be. The God King pulled Apocalypse and Thunder God up, sighed, and flew back to the palace. The God of Thunder was silent for a long time, looking at the direction where Loki disappeared in trance. My father chose to save me. I don't know what will happen to Loki, Thor said with some guilt and pain. Don't worry, Loki's fate is very high, I guarantee you, he is still alive. Really? Apocalypse nodded affirmatively. This gave Thor a lot of comfort and he felt much better. After a while, the God of Thunder said, Tang, my good brother, you may have gotten into big trouble just now. After a little explanation, Apocalypse finally understood why the God of Thunder got happier the more he pushed the rainbow needle. I only blame myself for being an earthling for too long and not having any common sense about the universe. However, the universe is so big, it may not necessarily hit a planet. Even if it hits a planet, it may not be a living planet, and even if it is a living planet, it may not have intelligent life. Tianchi could only comfort himself in this way. The two men stood on the beach of the universe, with stars dotted and the sea water flowing, and an image of explosion and destruction beside them, which gave them a different kind of poetry. Apocalypse looked at the starry sky swept by the rainbow light just now, and asked, Thor, look, are there any fewer stars? It should be no less. Saul squinted his eyes and looked at it for a long time. You can't tell the difference at all, can you? I'm not Heimdall, who can memorize the stars in the sky all day long. Okay. The two calmed down and returned to the palace to rest. Now that the rainbow bridge is broken, there is no hope of returning to Earth in a short time. Tianchi lay on the bed, bored and thinking about today's events, comparing them with the plot in his memory. As I thought about it, a chill rose from the bottom of my heart. The God King is not simple. Thousands of years ago, Odin picked up Loki in the temple of Jotunheim. This was a strange thing. Going to someone else's lair, seeing an alien baby, suddenly bursting with maternal love, bringing it back to raise him as an adult, this style of painting is obviously abnormal. How could a God King who conquered the 9 realms and countless civilians die because of him be so kind to a woman? Even if you suddenly have a conscience, you can just bring a child back and let ordinary people raise it. Why should you raise it as a prince? You know, this is the son of frost giant King Laufey. But Laufey didn't know all this. Secondly, when Thor was crowned for the first time, the frost giant sneaked in without Heimdall's eyes and ears. Did no one doubt Loki? Ordinary people dare not question the prince's justification without evidence. Loki was brought up by Odin and Frigga himself, and things like illusions may have been taught by Frigga. They couldn't possibly not know what their son was capable of. In the whole thing, I didn't hear that they were trying to track down who brought the frost giants in. On the contrary, Thor's exile seems too heavy. You people from Jotunheim came over to make a fuss, and I, the people from Asgard, also went over to make a fuss. It was a tie at best. There was no reason to be so cowardly as to exile my heir. By coincidence, the God King Odin fainted and fell asleep at this time, and Loki could finally do whatever he wanted. Afterwards, he designed a trap to kill the frost giant King Laufey and staged the drama of parent-child patricide. There are many such plots in Tianchi's memory. Then, Loki also wanted to destroy the entire kingdom of frost giants. The Queen of Gods disappeared, and Odin didn't wake up. If Thor hadn't taken action in time and decisively smashed the rainbow bridge, Loki would have succeeded. When the rainbow bridge exploded, Odin, who was unconscious even with the ice blade in front of him, suddenly woke up. The first thing he did after waking up was not to look for water, but to jump out to save others. Is this a normal reaction for an old man who is about to die? It was obvious that he saw that his own son was in danger and could no longer pretend. In the original plot, it was Loki who let go. But with the strength of the God King, if he really wanted to pull him up, it was only an arm's length away. How could he not be able to pull him up? With the arrival of Apocalypse, the God King directly chose to save Thor in Apocalypse, letting Loki fall into the void of the cosmic sea. If all these doubts are coincidence, then it is too coincidental to be believed. It can be said that the probability of the frost giant disappearing in the whole thing is as high as 99%, and the only surprise is Thor. Thor returned from the earth a little late, or he was not so compassionate. After a little hesitation, Asgard's worst enemy, the frost giants, completely disappeared from the universe. Even in the world of gods, annihilating a race is a great sin. And Loki can bear all these sins alone, and then Thor can rule Asgard in the name of the benevolent king. If this were a layout, this would be horrific. He is indeed a divine king who can rule the 9 realms. God King Odin does not have the ability to foresee the future. If this was a plan that started thousands of years ago, then the only person who assisted in it was God Queen Frigga. Today, as soon as they met, God Queen Frigga gave her enough face. Tianchi was a little proud of this polite attitude at first, thinking it was his advantage after traveling through time. Thinking about it now, I can't help but sweat on my back. Although the Queen of Gods may not necessarily have any ill intentions toward herself, she may not have a plan. The next day, there was a celebration banquet. The frost giant king invaded and died in Asgard. He was the victor no matter what, so it was necessary to hold a banquet to boost morale. The god of thunder, dressed in a set of medieval robes, called to the apocalypse and took in the surrounding scenery before the banquet began. At this time during the day, Tianchi looked at the sun in the sky and asked, "Is that sun real?" "Real. Who built Asgard? So awesome. Such a large continent cannot be formed naturally by the universe. If the weight of matter reaches a certain scale, it will collapse into a sphere under the action of gravity. Therefore, the most common natural celestial bodies in the universe are spherical. It deliberately maintains the structure of a flat continent like this, and also uses all kinds of incredible means to build the cosmic sea. The scale of the work is beyond imagination. Even in order to simulate the night and day caused by the rotation of the planet, a star was captured and allowed to revolve around Asgard. This is the legendary realm of catching stars and capturing the moon." Thor shrugged. "Some people say it was built during my father's heyday, but I don't think he was that strong." Just as he was talking, Sif came from a distance. Today, Sif did not wear warrior leather armor, but wore a blue and white dress and a lace belt, which particularly showed off her figure. She had a simple shawl hairstyle on her head, changing her previous heroic aura and becoming a gentle lady. Apocalypse's eyes lit up when he saw it. He had never seen Sif in this shape before, including in his past life memories. He was wearing a leather armor suit before, and he looked brave, but his figure was really nothing to look at. "Thor, you don't have any thoughts about Sif. What do you think? She's my brother." "Ah, she is a woman, and a beautiful woman. Haven't you noticed this? Can't women be brothers?" Speaking of which, Thor's character is considered strange in Asgard. Although he clearly has a distinguished position, he has no idea of power. He likes to fight, but he is also very kind. He is tall and handsome, and with the bonus of being the son of God, it stands to reason that there will be no shortage of women around him, but except for Jane, the one who is his destiny, I have never seen him hook up with other women. In addition, his personality is a bit funny, and he does not have the majesty of the Son of God at all. If you take away the halo from him, his personality is more like that of a grown boy who doesn't really have any special pursuits other than playing. Tianchi was helpless. Was he pretending to be stupid or was he really stupid? He gestured with his hand and said, "Women have different body structures and different thoughts. If you treat her as a brother, do others treat you as a brother?" The god of thunder said carelessly, "It doesn't matter whether she has breasts or not, whether she has a penis or not, as long as we fight together, we are brothers." These words were just heard by Sif, who was approaching, and suddenly a dark look appeared on her face. Then he glared at Tianchi fiercely, as if blaming him for bringing his prince into trouble. "Tianchi is unjust." This was said by the god of thunder. "Why are you glaring at me?" Today was a formal occasion. Sif did not greet Thor as usual. Instead, she slightly bent her legs and made a ladylike salute, saying, "Your Highness Thor, the Queen invites you to come over. The banquet is about to begin." Quote, "It is good." The banquet was held in the palace, and Apocalypse looked at it as he walked, especially the dome. The palace is majestic and majestic. The dome alone is tens of meters high and there are no pillars to block it. It is full of Asgard's history, but they are all very peaceful pictures, and there is nothing unusual about them. But Tianchi knew that there was another layer inside. That layer is the real history of Asgard, a bloody, violent and blood-filled history of conquest. Palace Hall. The god King Odin, who was weak and comatose just the day before yesterday and was almost killed by the frost giant King Loki in his dream, was in high spirits today and delivered a speech on the throne. During the days when I was ill, Loki took on the responsibility of defending the kingdom of God. Not only did he thwart the frost giant's conspiracy, but he also killed the invading Loki, which demonstrated the majesty of my kingdom of Asgard. Here's to Loki. Here's to Loki. Everyone cheered with a toast. Originally Loki wanted to pursue the victory and completely destroy Jotunheim, but Thor was compassionate and did not hesitate to destroy the Rainbow Bridge. He teamed up with his friend Tang Tianchi to stop this act. Because you have such a kind prince, raise your glass. To Saul. Here's to Saul. This time, everyone cheered louder. After Odin finished speaking, God Queen Frigga stepped forward to say something again. Neither of them mentioned Apocalypse pushing the rainbow needle in their speeches. After all, the real culprit was Loki. On the contrary, he intentionally or unintentionally exaggerated Apocalypse's achievements and emphasized his friendship with Thor. It seems that there is no deviation from the truth, and the credit is even attributed to Loki, but the meaning is very different from the importance. The Jotunheim who escaped and the frost giants who survived may even be grateful to Thor, and their anger will only be directed at Loki in the future. If he hadn't figured out some causes and consequences last night, Apocalypse would probably be as silly as Thor right now. The god of thunder may never know how many things his parents secretly did behind the scenes in order for him to rule the 9 realms safely. It seems that the gods not only compete in strength, but also in conspiracy. Just as they were thinking about this, Odin and Frigga joined hands and said loudly, "With the discussion and approval of the Council of Elders, we have decided to grant the title of Prince Tang Tianchi to Thor's good brother and the hero of this battle." Tianchi was stunned. Couldn't he? Are you so willing to spend money? What is the title of prince? Second only to the prince. If Loki and Thor unfortunately die, the prince may even succeed as the king of Asgard. Sif, who witnessed what happened last night, also looked puzzled. If Apocalypse helped, she did. But when it comes to being granted the title of prince, there is a huge gap. Although many people of Asgard also have doubts, the God King, God Queen, and the full support of the Council of Elders have become an unquestionable divine decree. Thor patted Tianchi on the shoulder and said, "Tang, it's your turn to go up." Tianchi glanced at Thor. Did this guy really not feel anything was wrong at all? It seems that in the original plot, he passed the position of king to the Valkyrie Big Black Girl, which was a really wise move. Anyone could do it better than this big joke like him. At this time, there were bursts of applause and everyone was watching, welcoming the Apocalypse. Apocalypse is not very happy, and the implication of tricking is too obvious. Do you really think that I have the same IQ as the God of Thunder? Going up means accepting the good intentions of the God King and God Queen, and you will be bound to Asgard from now on. You can't ignore what happens in Asgard. Why don't you go up? Well, it seems that if Asgard and Thor have something to do, I won't care about it. In this case, it is better to simply accept this kindness. If you don't take it, you don't take it for nothing. Apocalypse stood up and waved to the applauding crowd. Countless people of Asgard were also looking at this strange new prince, and many people asked each other in whispers about the origin of this prince. The moment he took over the scepter representing the prince's identity, Tianchi sensed a mysterious energy wave that appeared outside the palace. After glancing at the God King and God Queen, they didn't seem to notice. Apocalypse is a little strange. There is no reason why the God King cannot sense the energy fluctuations he can sense. Could he be from Asgard? But the energy characteristics are obviously different. After the investiture ceremony, everyone was free to eat and drink. Thor shouted, "Dawn, come here quickly. Last time I was immortal and was knocked down by you. Now that I have regained my power, let's compete again." Suddenly seeing Frigga coming from behind, her voice suddenly became softer, "Mother." Frigga was obviously in a good mood. She sat down gracefully and said, Prince Tang, since you are already a member of Asgard, I will speak frankly. What do you think of Sif? Apocalypse thought to himself, does Frigga want to help persuade Thor? In the original plot, it was God King Odin who persuaded him, but unfortunately he could not be persuaded. He could only say, very good. He is beautiful and has strong fighting ability. In that case, why don't I betroth her to you, what do you think? What, me? Tianchi was stunned. The plot is wrong, shouldn't it be Thor? Apocalypse looked at Thor and saw that he had nothing to do with him and was waiting to watch the show. Wait a minute, you just said betrothal. I thought Asgard had free love. Frigga smiled and said, of course we are free to choose. Asgardians have a lifespan of thousands of years. If they were not in love, how could the couple stay together for such a long time? I've already asked her, it just depends on what you think. Apocalypse looked at Sif and saw that Sif had her eyes downcast, her hands folded together on her lap, trying to pretend to be a lady, generous and calm, but unfortunately her red face betrayed her. Sif's original feelings for Thor were more like her feelings for an idol. She was the only woman in that fighting team, the other Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg were all extremely rough men. Only the god of thunder is handsome and a prince, so it is inevitable that some feelings will arise. If Thor responded, this trace of affection would naturally take root and sprout. However, Thor had no interest in it at all, so it was wiped out in a flash. After meeting Apocalypse on the Earth and having several contacts, he gradually fell in love with this powerful man who was not inferior to the god of thunder. It's just that Apocalypse has always taken it for granted to associate him with Thor, and he didn't notice Sif's many little thoughts and tricks. If this relationship develops normally, I don't know how long it will take for it to progress, or it may even be missed. But last night, Apocalypse came in with Sif under his arm and met the god queen Frigga. As a woman, I naturally understand women best. If you didn't have a crush on a man, how could you be so submissive and cooperative? Therefore, Sif was included in the plan to win over Apocalypse. The God King and God Queen worked together to confer titles on Apocalypse while bringing Sif and Apocalypse together. Although Sif felt a little happy, this was an unusual matchmaking match made by the God King and God Queen, and since she already had a good impression of Apocalypse, she agreed. Tianchi said, you don't know yet, but I already have a wife. When Exif heard this, her face turned pale. Frigga said, Asgard is not monogamous, and there is no conflict with whether you have a wife or not. Tianchi looked confused. It would be a lie if I said I wasn't moved. Facing a stunning divine warrior like Sif, a normal man would have some thoughts, let alone now that he is coming to his door. It's just that it's hard to explain this to Black Widow when I go back. After all, not long ago, he called S.H.I.E.L.D. and banned her from using beauty skills, so he turned around and took other beauties home. You can't have such double standards as a human being. At this time, the god of thunder said, Mother, I'm afraid this matter is a bit difficult for Brother Tang. He loves his wife very much. The three of them looked at Thor, including Apocalypse, wondering, have I talked to Thor about Black Widow? It seems not to mention whether you love it or not. Thor raised his flowing golden hair and said proudly, my girlfriend Jane has a student named Daisy. She is a fierce hottie. She is very attracted to Tang, and she almost pounced on her. Jian also secretly discussed with me how to match them up so as not to annoy the eyes. It's just that the earth was in such a hurry that I didn't have time to act. But Dawn didn't even look at her. He didn't even touch her hand. At first, I thought he liked handsome men. The Queen of Gods slapped him on the head and said, speak well. Ahem, I thought Tang just didn't like that type. Now that I hear him say he has a wife, I realize that Tang is a gentleman. Even in the face of temptation, he insists on adhering to the law of loyalty between husband and wife. So, I am sure that he loves his wife very much. After a long discussion, Thor felt that his reasoning was flawless, and his face showed a look of shame. Tianchi was stunned when he heard this. Am I that noble in the eyes of others? At that time, he was running around and had no time to talk to Daisy. He had just finished fighting the destroyer and had not even had time to sit down and rest for a while. He came to Asgard without even having time to test his character. The Queen of Gods sighed and said, to put it this way, we are being rude. Seeing the pale-faced Sif beside her, the queen felt a little distressed and asked, "Is your wife from the Eastern Protoss or someone else?" "No, she is considered an ordinary Earthling. Black Widow is a superhero to people on Earth, but to Asgard, she is really just an ordinary person," the Queen of Gods said. "If this is the case, the lifespan of people on Earth is only 100 years. If you stay with her for this life, 100 years later, you and Sif will be together again. It does not violate your own beliefs. Asgardians generally have a lifespan of several thousand years, and the lifespan of the strong and the weak may sometimes differ by 1 or 2,000 years. Not to mention the pair of Thor and Jane. If there are no special circumstances, Jane can only accompany Thor for 100 years. Not to mention whether Thor will find a new love in the future. At least according to the Asgardian concept, companionship has a length of time unless the two people have the same lifespan." Sif squeezed the fabric of the skirt tightly with both hands and whispered, "Dawn, I still have at least 3,000 years to live, and I am willing to wait for you for 100 years. Such a stunning divine warrior has arrived at your doorstep, but you still have to wait 100 years. Even a man can't bear it." Apocalypse was heartbroken, and he decided to become a scumbag for once, lest he regret it for the rest of his life. "No need to wait." Before he finished speaking, Thor interrupted, "Tang is right, there is no need to wait. If he eats from the bowl and looks at the pot, his relationship with his current wife will not be pure. And Sif, if you waste 100 years of youth, what if you meet someone you like during this period? To love, you need to let both parties be free, and hope that the other person will live happily." Thor shook his hair. Since meeting Jane, he felt that he had understood the true meaning of love. Queen Frigga sighed and said, "Prince Tang is really admirable. As a woman, I really envy your wife. If I say more, it will be disrespectful to your love." Tianchi was confused. "Come on, I'm really not what you think." Frigga glanced at Sif and asked, "Sif, what do you want to say?" Sif raised her head and said firmly, "Dawn, it's my business to wait, and I won't ruin it for you. After 100 years, no matter what decision you make, I will respect you." After saying that, his eyes turned red and he ran away in a hurry. The queen stood up and said, "Alas, let you young people decide on your affairs." After speaking, he also left. This time, Apocalypse and Sif were not brought together, so the plan was not perfect. However, the queen was still very satisfied to see that her newly knighted Prince Tang had such a noble view of love. It is not good to push too much and force others to violate their firm beliefs. Watching the two people leave, Tianchi stayed on the spot dumbfounded. "The second half of my sentence was, 0.100 years is too long, it's okay now. You guys should just let me finish my words. Sif, you should seduce me." Daisy would also say things like, "If you don't wear a ring, it doesn't matter." You wouldn't say, "It doesn't matter if you were in another country." Maybe I would give in. Now the funny god of thunder has made himself so noble that even the queen and Sif believe him. No matter how thick-skinned Apocalypse is, he can't fall out on the spot. From a lover to a scumbag, he can only hold his words in his stomach. Seeing that Tianchi's expression was not good, the god of thunder patted his shoulder and said, "Come on, drink, you're welcome. As a younger generation, it's really inconvenient for you to reject your mother directly and embarrass her. Brother, I've said it for you. Quote, you blocked my way to being a scumbag, and you still want me to thank you." Tianchi gritted his teeth and said, "I thank your whole family. Thor, just thank me and my father, queen, and queen. No need to thank that fool Loki." Apocalypse and Thor had a round of drinks, feeling a little emotional. If the god of thunder hadn't interrupted him, would he have really accepted the queen's wooing? Alas, human nature really cannot stand the test. However, thinking of Sif's heroic and stunning charm, I couldn't help but sigh. TMD, animal nature, even more cannot stand the test. After drinking for a while, Tianchi remembered that the energy fluctuation he had just sensed had not dissipated yet, so he simply went out to take a look, lest he drank too much and couldn't help but beat Thor on the spot. As he walked away, people around him saluted Tianchi one after another. When I arrived at the square, I saw a translucent rectangular cube standing on the ground, glowing slightly with yellow light. In front of the rectangular body, stood a middle-aged black ant with a plump figure, wearing a tight-fitting anti-riot suit, and holding a folder in her hand. The people around seemed not to have seen the translucent rectangular shape in the black ant. When they came to her, they walked around unconsciously. Seeing Tianqi approaching, the black ant said, "Mr. Tang, you finally came out." As soon as he saw this posture, Tianqi's heart thumped twice. This is the time from the Time Variation Administration. There is a timeline where Loki was tortured a lot by the people from the Time Variation Administration. Although I tried my best to maintain the original plot, after all, so much had changed, and it was impossible for them not to know. "Are you here to catch me?" The black ant said quickly. "Don't dare, Mr. Tang, you misunderstood. Your dignity is far beyond my authority. I am here to convey a message." "Say what?" "Your existence has seriously changed the sacred timeline, and a large number of non-existent results have appeared. At first, we thought it was another time criminal. We were just about to form a team to hunt it down, but suddenly instructions from the highest level came." Apocalypse interrupted. "Wait, the highest level? Do you mean the Time Guardian?" "Yes. Excuse me, is the Time Guardian one person? Or three people?" Apocalypse asked, staring into the black ant's eyes. "Mr. Tang, you really know. It's a person." Sigh. "To be honest, if it weren't for your appearance, Mr. Tang, I wouldn't have known that the Guardian was a person. Those three people turned out to be just mechanical puppets." In the timeline of Loki, Marvel's Loki was unwilling to be erased and joined forces with the female Loki who was on the run in another timeline to resist the Time Variation Administration. Later, when they broke into the headquarters, they discovered that the three seemingly Time Guardians turned out to be just three puppets. If it hadn't been for Loki's arrival, the employees of the Time Bureau would have been deceived for hundreds of millions of years. The Guardian was afraid that you would misunderstand, so he showed up to me specifically to tell you that his name is Kong. Kong in the original plot seemed a bit arrogant, but that was just an appearance. Being able to suppress the multiverse for hundreds of millions of years and unify the timeline, countless strongmen can only follow the time rules set by him and cannot change their fate. How can it be so simple? Just like when God King Odin was on Earth, people who saw him could never imagine how terrifying this bad old man was. But a strong man like Odin could only follow the sacred timeline. Even Frigga had seen the tragic fate of Asgard and did not dare or be able to change it. With such a comparison, one can imagine how great Kong is. The powerful God King was nothing more than an ant in front of him. The Guardian has issued an instruction specifically for you, making you an exception. In other words, as long as the timeline is related to you, it does not violate the laws of the Time Bureau. Tianqi felt happy. Could he finally let go? I had always been submissive before. In addition to being afraid of losing the advantage of the prophet, I was also afraid of the unknown existence of the Time Variation Administration. Tianqi suppressed the joy in his heart and said, "Well, okay. Thank you, Kong, for me." The black ant continued. "However, this is not the news I want to bring. The news is..." The black ant's eyes suddenly changed. Her eyes widened and emitted two golden rays of light. When she opened her mouth, a rich middle-aged male voice came out. "Mr. Tang, I'm sorry that I can only meet you in this way. Because of your appearance, the sacred timeline has deviated and become loose. Those powerful people trapped in the sacred timeline are starting to make moves. They are sniffing the long river of time, looking for the source that caused the sacred timeline to loosen. Once discovered, I am afraid that countless unimaginable powerful people will come. Mr. Tang, although you are of noble nature, you are not very strong. Once discovered, you may not be able to survive, and your soul mark will also be plundered by the strong. When the time comes, the sacred timeline will be annihilated and divided into countless chaotic timelines. It will be an era of great chaos in which all life will be devastated. Asgard is a very powerful Protoss. Your acceptance of Asgard's knighthood this time is already a very powerful wave. I'm afraid some strong people have already begun to test it. Tell Frigga to stop prying into the river of time. If you meet a strong person, her memory may reveal your existence." Tianqi asked, "What should I do?" "Increase your strength as soon as possible. Can you help me? Since the Time Guardians have shown goodwill to themselves, it is not impossible to rely on their power to ensure safety when necessary. It's better than fighting alone." "We can't help you. The Time Bureau is the target of those powerful people. If you have more contact, I'm afraid you will be located soon. And a strange expression suddenly appeared on the black ant's face. Although you are a great hope for the universe if you are alive. But if you die, the next best thing is to grab your soul mark, which will be a great hope for us. It's a real benefit. After saying that, the golden light in the black ant's eyes disappeared and her voice returned to normal. Okay, Mr. Tang, I've brought the information. Goodbye. After saying that, the black ant turned around and entered the rectangular parallelepiped and disappeared. Just as the cuboid disappeared, a divine light suddenly flew over. Odin and Frigga appear next to Apocalypse. Prince Tang, what happened just now? You disappeared for 3 seconds under my induction. Odin said. The meeting between Apocalypse and the Time Bureau just now lasted at least 10 minutes, but under Odin's divine consciousness, only 3 seconds passed. Obviously, this is the Time Bureau's specialty, changing time. However, being able to hide it from Odin's nose for just 3 seconds was enough to alert them. Apocalypse said to Queen Frigga, the unpredictable power you mentioned has appeared. Frigga's face turned pale and she trembled. Is Asgard's fate really unchangeable? Apocalypse shook his head and said, he allowed me to change Asgard, but there is one condition. You are not allowed to peek into the river of time. Otherwise, it may cause great terror. Odin and Frigga rejoice. Even Odin, the old god king, couldn't control himself and was beaming with joy. This princely title was finally not given in vain, and there is good news so soon. If they are allowed to change their future destiny, there will be too much room for maneuver for them. It's not that difficult, I just don't pry. Frigga said, as long as I know that Asgard is better than before, even if it's just a little bit better, I'll be satisfied. At this time, Odin said, Prince Tang, Thor told me before that your potential has been exhausted and you want to break your own shackles. I have thought of a way, but it may be a little dangerous. Apocalypse is the key to changing the fate of Asgard, and the God King wishes that his strength would be as high as possible. Any solution? You come with me. The Queen called Thor and Sif, and a group of 5 people walked towards the Asgard treasure house. The treasure house is built in a huge basement, with a height of dozens of meters. It is not very bright, but it does not feel oppressive. It was a rare visit to Asgard's treasure house, so Apocalypse naturally had to observe it carefully. Even Sif looked like a curious baby. Walking down a wide staircase and on the treasure trove passage, the first thing that catches your eye is a huge golden gauntlet, the Infinity Gauntlet. In Thor 3, Hela pushed down the Infinity Gauntlet when she came in, looking impatient and calling it a fake. But when Tianchi thought about it carefully, he had 2 doubts. First, with Odin's status, how could he collect a fake? The Infinity Gauntlet is just a carrier and has no power in itself. In the original plot, even Iron Man created a nano-infinity gauntlet. For a kingdom of God, it would not be too difficult to create an infinity gauntlet. There is no need to collect fakes. Secondly, and most importantly, this glove is for the right hand. And Thanos' left hand. If the dwarves made a pair, then one right hand and one left hand would make sense. In other words, he originally only built the right-hand glove in front of him, but was later forced by Thanos to build a left-hand glove. However, Tianchi couldn't tell the difference between true and false, so he looked around twice and asked, God King, is this glove real or fake? Thor was the first to quit and shouted, how can there be fakes in my Asgardian treasure house? Of course it is real. Odin said calmly, it's true. Apocalypse looked at Odin and said with a smile, strange, why would someone say it is a fake? Thor interjected again, which ignorant guy dares to say it is fake? Let's see if I don't beat the shit out of him. The Queen scolded, don't disturb Prince Tang from talking to your father. The god of thunder looked aggrieved. Tang Ta had just become a prince, how could he have a higher status than himself as a prince? I have to queue behind him when talking. Odin smiled and said, I lied to her. If she knew it was true, I'm afraid she would search the universe for infinite stones, and I don't know how much trouble she would cause. I also added a restriction on it, which will not be unlocked until it is unlocked. It's no different from a fake. Oh, Tianchi suddenly realized. Sure enough, Hela still couldn't defeat the cunning Odin. If his lifespan hadn't come to an end, there's no telling when he would be freed from the seal. A few steps further, there was a dark blue box. Apocalypse knew this. It was the source of power for the frost giants, also known as the Box of Winter. However, it doesn't seem to be very powerful, and Gila doesn't like it anyway. Tianchi glanced at the other treasures briefly, but was not interested. Finally, Odin took him and stopped in front of a pot of fire and said, "Prince Tang, this is the key to breaking through your shackles." This fire uses a dark golden bottom basin with a wooden support underneath. There is no fuel. The flame beats as if it is alive, endless and never extinguished. It is the eternal fire. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.